greatness doesn't just happen. It is created one step at a time. A skyscraper starts with one plan. A masterpiece starts with one simple brushstroke. And a student fully prepared to lead and serve begins with one community pulling together for the benefit of all. One teacher can inspire. One caring adult can support. One idea can change everything. Over the next 5 years, Columbus City Schools is embarking on a path guided by our students and their families.
To our students, you are the reason that we're doing all of this important work. It is important for us that you are successful. Now we're more intentional. Now we're focusing on the priorities that we believe are important for our students right now. Our portrait of a graduate is Columbus City Schools community coming together, stating that these are our hopes and dreams and aspirations for our students. We must put our students out front. They can do it. They have demonstrated across our district and other places that if you provide for them the environment for them to thrive, they can do the unimaginable.
Good evening, everyone. I am calling our November 1st regular board business meeting to order. Please call the roll.
President Adair,
Present.
Ms. Beckerly,
Present.
Mr. Brown,
I'm here.
Mr. Cole, Dr. Pierce, Vice President Reyes.
Here.
And Ms. Vera. Here. You have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you please stand and join me in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, board members, on our agenda this evening, we do not have anybody signed up for comment on agenda items. We are expecting a report from the superintendent, no report from our internal auditor, some items from our treasurer. We have several matters on our board matters agenda. We have notice of public hearing on reemployment. We have our consent agenda. We have 3 speakers on our non-agenda items. And then we will have executive session this evening and come back here to adjourn. Is there a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second? Oh, thank you. I should have asked earlier, are there any additions or changes to our agenda? Hearing none, and without objection, our agenda has been adopted. Go ahead and turn it over to the superintendent. Good evening, Madam Superintendent.
Good evening, and thank you, President Adair. Today is National Family Literacy Day, and November is National Family Literacy Month. So with that, I'd like to share with you some exciting current and upcoming initiatives focused on literacy. Last week, I recorded a read-along for our new Together We Read CCS virtual series we're launching later this month. The series will continue throughout the school year and will include a variety of books read by members of our CCS family. We have continued the home library initiative we launched last year, and the next set of book bundles are expected to arrive at schools in mid-November. This is in addition to our Pathway Express book bundles. Our Scholastic partnership now includes LitPro K-8, which gives students access to thousands of books and online learning activities in Clever. We also have an online hub of resources on our website for students and families, ranging from early childhood to high schoolers. In addition, we have been working closely with community partners like the Columbus Metropolitan Library to ensure students have access to books that interest them. Students can utilize the SOAR platform in Clever to access free ebooks 24/7 from the local library. This year, we're dedicating one of our weekly virtual family engagement sessions each month to provide insight into our literacy work and share strategies for home. This would take place on the second Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. Families can learn more on our website's Family Engagement Session RSVP page. Finally, all of our pre-K families are invited to join us for our November Early Childhood Education Family Engagement Night, Love of Literacy, on Wednesday, November 9th from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Columbus Metropolitan Main Library Auditorium. Now I'm going to shift a bit and provide you with a brief transportation update. We are continuing to make progress. Alpha Route is working on background repairs and upgrades, and they have also started the process to run a new solution to improve the efficiency of the routes to compare with our current set of routes. The upload of files for students needed to be routed has slowed tremendously over the last 2 weeks, and we are finally able to work through the backlog of students needing to be assigned a new route. We will continue to place students on buses as quickly as we are able with the help of Alpha's team. In addition, we are running our previous VersaTrans routing system simultaneously with Alpha Route. We have been able to identify several schools that have already had a number of buses needed to serve those students reduced. We are working to do this for all schools to make better use of our resources. We are working diligently to fix the issues we have been able to identify and have all student routing complete by mid-November in order to start the new routes when we return from winter break. Families should start receiving mailers with their new bus routes and bus stop times by mid-December. Finally, we are implementing the use of a new communication tool called EZ District. This will be used by the Transportation Dispatch Center and the call center. We will now have the ability to link all families in Infinite Campus and contact all schools and parents, CCS and charter non-public, to have more consistent and timely notifications regarding routes and pickup and drop-off times. In order for this process to work, however, we need all families of transportation-eligible students to update their information in Infinite Campus. With that said, staffing and bus driver daily attendance continues to be a concern. As of last week, the average call-off rate for our week prior was at 16% of drivers for the morning routes and 15% for the afternoon routes. And as you can see from the charts here, we're showing our routes compared to our bus drivers. We still need more drivers. We currently have 18 trainees with 8 set to test for their CDLs next week and 3 more at the end of November. The other 7 just recently started their training. So we still are recruiting for more drivers. We're proactively recruiting drivers of all experience levels. Interested candidates can visit our website and apply online. And I'd like to open the floor for any questions that you may have before I go to another item. Any questions regarding the transportation or the literacy?
Are there questions for Superintendent thus far? Board Member Beckerly and Board Member Vera.
Mine is less of a question and more of a request, and that is, you know, the reports tend to be about inputs, and I'd like to know, and maybe we can't do this, and then I'll stop asking for it, but how many students are impacted? How many are late? How many are missing school? And are those numbers going up or down? I mean, I asked for this last year too, like we need outcomes as in terms of, you know, knowing how many drivers we have or don't have. It is sobering and that's a cause, but I'd like to know Like, how many on a daily basis are late? Are they late by a half hour? How many are late by, are they late getting home? And so that we can track our progress. And that's something that if it was in the weekly report, I don't think we need to even be talking about at the board meeting necessarily, just so that we're keeping track of it.
Member Vera?
Thank you, Superintendent. My question is related to the kids that we know are not getting to school because of transportation. So in regards, have we been able to capture how many kids are missing school because of lack of transportation is my first question. Do we know?
I don't have that number. The last number we gave was the number of students that have not been routed. Because remember, with our current routing system, if a route changes, it shifted everyone on that particular that bus route.
Okay.
But the number of students, the latest number that we have of the number of students that had not been routed, I don't have that number, but I can provide that number for you.
Thank you. And I guess my follow-up to that is, what is our flexibility for those kids that are missing instruction in terms of, assignments? How are we working to support our kids who are missing school simply because they can't get there?
Right. So we don't know if students are, that's the question I have to provide. I don't know if there are students who have missed school because they are not being transported.
Okay.
Right? So once we verify what that number is, I can provide that.
Okay.
And if students are missing school because of transportation, we can provide their assignments. We talked about before when Dr. Chapman answered that question that we definitely want our students here. When our students miss, those days are counted against them. So we want to make sure that the schools are providing students with their lessons so they can make up their lessons when they return to school. But the most important question is how many students have not reported to school because of transportation.
Yeah.
And when we talked about that, I'm sure about a month ago, we had a number that was reduced of the number that still needed routed, and I think Dr. Klein provided that number, and I provided it in the update. We do know that we made some headway on students from Mifflin High School, and I think the principal is here, because that was a school that we were concerned about, and we were looking at alternative to pickups, Rakota, et cetera, for students, but we have found some remedy for the students at Mifflin High School.
Okay.
But as of today, I do not have a number of students who have not yet reported to school because of a transportation, because they have not received transportation from CCS.
Thank you for that. So I just want to make sure I understand that. And so we are allowing for flexibility in terms of assignments and instruction, and then also obviously making sure that attendance is not being held against them if in fact that is the reason why they're
Right.
not.
So students that are marked absent, remember we talked about that with ODE. If students are, transportation is not a reason that students cannot be marked absent. If they do not attend school because of transportation, they will be marked absent.
Is it marked as an excused absence, or is it marked as?
It's unexcused, isn't it? Unexcused or excused? I think it's unexcused, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure what that code is. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
Dr. Klein?
oh, there she is. Thank you. Hi, Dr. Klein.
Yes, Dr. Dixon, to board members' question. Students are marked with a transportation waiting period when they do not have a bus. I am running the report right now to find out for you how many currently do not have a bus. But please remember that this is dependent on whether or not the school marks them appropriately. So transportation waiting, and it is an absence that we call an excused absence, but remember, excused absences do count against chronic absenteeism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klein.
Right. Okay.
And students still miss the instructional time. Just because they can make up the work,
Right, they missed their
they
instruction.
still miss instructional time.
Exactly, yeah, that's what we pointed out last time, that and Dr. Chapman illuminated that. We want them in school. And so a lot of times too, remember, we also talked about the number of students that may change their bus route. So if they wanted a new stop, there was a delay on the, on that new routing for that. So we were trying to eliminate all of those different variances that students may need if they change their routes. But the key number is how many students have still not attended because of transportation, not necessarily if they had their routes changed to new one, but it's the ones that have not attended school at all.
And I think added to not attended at all are, significantly late.
Correct, yes.
Right.
But we do know sometimes our students are late too because of the drivers, and we've had drivers that had to double up their routes. So because of that, we've had students arriving to school late and being picked up late because we've asked drivers to do double routes.
Yeah, because I think that this is like not a blame thing. This
Oh,
is
no,
just a where we are.
Where,
thing.
yes, exactly.
And then I think once you get that, then you say, this is happening with
Yes.
10 drivers doing double routes.
Yeah.
And this is happening, so that, but I think we need to know where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and making sure that all the schools, to Dr. Klein's point, making sure that all the attendance offices are in fact appropriately marking kids that are in fact late or missing school because of transportation. And I know Dr. Pierce brought up, the last time we talked about this, making sure that even if they're late, they have access to breakfast and making sure that they have access to any additional support that they can receive for any missed instructional time within reason, within
Right.
capacity.
Yeah, and we do know that too, just sort of the families that are listening. When students come, they can always eat breakfast when they come late. And many times they can take it to their classrooms. The lunch ladies, they have been awesome with that, making sure that our students have their breakfast and lunch. But that's good.
Dr. Pierce.
Thank you. So we've had this conversation a couple of times, and at this point, I'm extremely concerned about the instruction time that students are missing and the potential penalties that will come from the Ohio Department of Education for missed time. I know I posed this question in the past. I will pose it again. Are we petitioning, or are we getting paperwork through the Ohio Department of Education to explain why we will definitely have students that have chronic absenteeism rates due to our transportation issues?
So it runs the gamut of, we met with the Ohio Department of Education, the state superintendent, her chief of staff, legal counsel. They understand the issues that we have. We have received approximately, I believe, 161 complaints that have been filed by charter non-publics. I've asked for the potential for modifications in how we transport and what vehicles we can use to transport. That's codified in Ohio Revised Code. And we also have, working through Ohio 8 with their lobbyists, who's meeting with the legislature to propose some potential remedies for this issue.
So we're still at the place we were when I originally asked the question, because that's when you had the first meeting with ODE's team. Have we had a meeting number 2?
No, we're reached out. The best thing they could do was talked about some options of trying to increase the number of drivers. And I had a conversation with the chief of staff over there, forwarded them some information regarding our recruitment efforts, and they were going to work through their networks. I think, which I mentioned in a previous board meeting, talking to the veterans groups, Job and Family Services, and Ohio Department of Transportation. And at this point, I have not heard back from them. That was a recent conversation.
So are we thinking about other theories of actions or strategies that we can implement? We are the largest district in the state of Ohio with a number of families and students that can lobby and petition and write letters to our legislators. Are we thinking about that, using the force of our CEA and teaching staff?
What we've been focused on now, Dr. Pierce, is just trying to get our kids to school and get them there timely, and working with, we've been talking to ODE. They've been asking, how can we make sure that we're transporting all our students, plus the charter and public students. We've expressed over and over again the challenges that we have with our students, and they've, echoed those same sentiments on behalf of the charter non-public students, who they state are facing the same concerns that our students. We've been talking about what could we do, and they've stated that we need to transport students in a timely fashion. And we've stated the concerns that is causing for our students and our families. And not that we are not concerned about these same concerns for our charter non-pubs, just like we had the families that spoke at our last board meeting. But as Dr. James has stated, we've not received any traction on any variances to remedy this. They are placing all responsibility of this in the district's hand.
Would it be possible to request through our legal team that we begin to release this information to the community and share it and be very vocal about the fact that ODE is not assisting or helping our district? I think at some point, we as a board need to step out and be vocal about the lack of support that's being given to us for transportation.
I mean, I don't know if it's your legal team, but I think this is the process to do it. I think what you were asking Dr. Dixon and Dr. James is more about what you're getting to right now, that it's turning into a political question. And so we as the electeds need to consider what we do. And I think that that would be an appropriate next step. It may be also something that the Policy Governance and Advocacy Committee looks at as well. That's actually part of the new charter. Part of the committee is to look at those advocacy issues. So that might be an option as well. So I think that that is something in terms of what should we as the political leaders be doing, and then maybe what should our advocacy arm in our government affairs be doing. I think those are two important questions.
So I look forward to us being able to do that work, especially if it comes to the Policy and Governance Committee. Excited to do that work with you, Board Member Brown. The second and the third question then I have are pretty basic. Do we know which days are being impacted by the absentee rates for our drivers? What day of the week?
Fridays and Mondays. Yeah, definitely Fridays.
Yeah, Fridays.
Fridays and Mondays.
Fridays and Mondays.
Yeah.
As we look at those days and those shifts, are we exploring, and of course this is within our CEA contract, you guys will have to see if we're allowed to do this, but are we exploring potential virtual asynchronous days, or something that we may have to disrupt and adjust how we're educating students Monday through Friday to accommodate what we're seeing? And we're seeing other districts moving from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. Are we starting to think about how we here in the city of Columbus need to disrupt and innovate with how we are actually doing education Monday through Friday?
No, we haven't explored that. We have been able, with drivers taking multiple shifts, we've just been able to transport students and getting them a little later to school and home. Our drivers have just taken on additional duties to get our students to school. So we've not seen the impact where students are not getting to school at all, like some of our other neighboring districts who have had to move to a different educational model. Our drivers have been stepping up and just saying that they may get there late, but they're getting there.
Okay, and then the last question in terms of our search and recruitment for drivers, did we have an opportunity to reach out to our upcoming seniors, our seniors that recently graduated, maybe our Columbus Promise students who might have some extra hours to come out and learn how to drive some of our smaller buses? Are we actively recruiting our CCS graduates for these opportunities?
You want to come up, Mike?
Hello.
I think you all have heard me say about 1 million times now that my dream is we graduate a student, we give them a diploma, and then we give them a job. So I think that all of that work will start ramping up as we head into the next hiring season, especially as the students are getting ready for graduation, so that we can get them into and slotted into positions so that we can make my dream and hopefully other dreams a reality, which is focus on graduating from school and then let's get you right into a job. So you're going to see all of that ramp up coming as we move into the last semester of the school year, so that we have some hiring ready and in place, especially when we want to have a lot of training happen over the summer so that folks can be ready to go on day one.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Additional questions? All right, turning it back to you.
Okay. So now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Kathy McFarland, Deputy Chief Executive of the Ohio School Boards Association, who is here with us tonight for a special recognition.
My mother here.
Good evening. I'm Kathy McFarland, OSBA Deputy Executive, Chief Executive. I'm joined by Mark Bobo, OSBA Senior Membership Engagement Consultant. OSBA's mission is to serve Ohio's public school members and the diverse districts they represent. As a member-driven association, OSBA's mission would not be accomplished without the work of dedicated members who serve as leaders of the association. We recognize that being a board member can be a full-time job. Taking on additional responsibility of serving at the state level is a significant additional commitment. We are here tonight to recognize and thank one of the valued leaders of the association, Jennifer Adair, for her service as a member of OSBA's 2022 Board of Trustees. President Adair not only leads the association as a trustee, but also as a member of the association's Central Region Executive Committee, OSBA Black Caucus, and she also serves as one of OSBA's ambassadors for public education. Mark, would you like to read the?
Jennifer Adair is hereby recognized by the Ohio School Board Association for outstanding service as a member of the OSBA Board of Trustees, 2022. Congratulations.
Jennifer's mom's here. Can we get a pic? Come on, come on. I'll say one more thing while you're getting a quick picture with her. We'd also like to present a plaque expressing our thanks to the Columbus City Schools Board of Education. We realize that successful state leaders come from successful and supportive school boards. Thank you for your support of President Adair and for sharing her with OSBA as she works on behalf of school boards across the state of Ohio. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm so good.
Those Adair women.
Got some boxes or chairs.
No, it has her name.
It has her name.
It has her name.
It's both of them? Oh.
I mean, it says, yeah.
I guess it says for us loaning her. Just for us loaning.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. That was a big, big, big surprise. Thank you, OSBA. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Dr. Pierce, who actually serves as a president of our region. You know, all of us know how important this type of organization is, and I think we have really talked about that, how strategically, especially as the largest district, we need to be able to leverage that, just like what Dr. Pierce was saying about what should we be doing as political leaders. And, you know, this is about working with all of the political leaders in the school board space. And so, you know, thank you, OSBA. Thank you, board members. You know, we have a lot of work to do still in this, and we look forward to doing it. So thank you all. And we all get this plaque, too. So. All right. Dr. Pierce.
Congratulations, and I just think this is a great time to just remind my colleagues that we do have to name our trustee for 2023. So we'll want to give that good thought and consideration. I'm sure President Adair is ever ready and steady to continue her service.
Unless someone else wants to, but yes.
But yes,
We'll put that on for next board meeting,
excellent.
sure. All right, Dr. Dixon?
Yeah, that concludes my report, but I do want to provide an update on that number. Dr. Klein just sent to me to 21 students
Have not been assigned
that have not been assigned.
since the beginning of the school year.
So I told you, just going to give me some more information to that, but the number is 21. So I will get some more information about where those 21 are, and I'll provide that to you tomorrow.
That could be new people
Good.
that didn't originally signed up also, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure when the dates, but I just want to give you that number because I wasn't sure. But I'll give you the more details tomorrow on the start date, et cetera, and how long that's been.
And if there's a pattern that exists between the 21 students.
Yes. Okay, but that's it for my report.
Thank you. Board members, if you will allow, if we take the agenda out of order, in looking at the speakers on non-agenda items, they're actually all here to talk about transportation, which we just talked about. And so I see some in the audience with children, and I'd like those children to go home and eat dinner and get ready for school tomorrow. So if you guys are okay and without objections, we can go ahead and move the non-agenda items, which is 26, in between 4 and 5.
I motion. Are you motioning?
I'm just going to do it. I see no objections.
All right.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and take it out of order. And so we're going to do our, we're going to go ahead and let them put the graphic up. They're getting it for me. We have 3 speakers on non-agenda items. I believe two are here in person and 1 is virtual. So the first speaker is Nicole Overstreet. Is Nicole here? No, okay, well, if she comes, we will then bring her back in. Lakeisha Jefferson. Okay, well, so much for having them do it now. Deanna Zimmerman. Yes, we have a winner. Okay. She's here to talk about transportation for my children. Take consideration of my facts. I want to follow up with implementation of transportation for my children. Ms. Zimmerman, you have 3 minutes to address the board. The board is here to listen. We will not ask you questions or provide comment. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Right. Starting my timer.
Oh, the timer will come up on the screen, so you can, as soon as you start talking, they will start.
Okay, perfect. Good evening to the president, board members, and Superintendent Dixon, and all those present. I am married with 2 children. They are in 2nd and 3rd grade at Hubbard Elementary. My husband and I emphasize the importance of education, in which our families did with us. However, many students' education this year has been disrupted due to the bus transportation system of Columbus City Schools. Multiple times throughout the week, the bus assigned to pick up our children is late. We have received voice recordings from the district acknowledging the workforce shortage and the lack of route management, and we have been asked to be flexible and understanding. We have complied when told to be at the bus stop 10 to 15 minutes ahead of the pickup schedule, only for the bus to come 20-plus minutes early or 30-plus minutes late. We have talked to numerous drivers and asked for more clarification, only to be told that the new system the district purchased is inoperable. We have voiced concerns about the bus stop where my students are the only onboarders and departers. There are no streetlights, no sidewalks, and just 1 block away, literally, these things are available. But we are told that transportation will not entertain a stop change. We have waited on the bus for over an hour because the afternoon bus route has its last high school students being dropped off 15 minutes after our school dismisses. When we get past the point of understanding, we attempt to call the transportation line, and if the transportation office answers, we are told that the bus cannot be tracked and we cannot be informed about the safety of our students and our children. I have received only 1 notification directly from transportation to inform me of a bus arriving late this year. Visualize this: my mother, 73 years of age, with no vehicle of her own, waiting on a bus that may come late or not at all. throughout the week. She's out there with her grandchildren in the cold for extended periods of time, in the rain, and soon to be the dark and snow. Furthermore, because we are working parents with little to no flexibility with work hours, we must rely on my mother's elderly friend to assist with transportation, or they miss out on education for that day. Not okay. Act on the problem now. Do not rely on the parents just to figure it out. I've been told that transportation is a privilege. Well, I say it's the district's responsibility. When you have a lottery of students and they're outside of a radius, it becomes your obligation. What you do for one, you should do for all. If you can find ways to find contractors to transport other schools and charter schools, and therefore, please take care of home. We have been gracious. We have been flexible. However, enough is enough. This disrupts our students' learning and their excitement for the school day. When the students arrive, many of them are already at a disadvantage with anxiety that's associated with the bus transportation. You knew this was going to be a problem. Do not say you put students first. Please show us, prove it to us, prove to me that you are listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman, for your advocacy. I don't know if any members of our team would like to speak with you since you are here, but they may do that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Actually, the other two are virtual. So we do have caller number one, Miss Nicole Overstreet. I believe she is on the line. She is here to speak about transportation issues for private and charter schools. Board action requested. Investigate why there is an issue with transporting our students.
Hi.
Students are not being picked up and left outside. Good evening, Miss Overstreet. You have 3 minutes to address the board. You may begin whenever you are ready.
First, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. I am very grateful. I am basically coming to you as a parent. I know that you are parents, you are grandparents, aunts, and uncles. My child has been given 3 different times to be picked up at the bus stop. It is 6:45, 7 o'clock, 7:17. It is very dark outside. I worry that I see kids walking the street late at night. It's dark at night, and people are driving fast. And then you have kids that are waiting for a bus that does not come and take them up. My concern is that there are human trafficking going on in Columbus, Ohio. And you have kids walking the street because their bus never picks them up. Now, we can talk about communication. Now, I understand. I talked to Mr. Odom. He has been great. I talked to the people at the front. They have been great. But the same issue is every day. We had a bus that did not come for 3.5 weeks. I took children to school. So for 3.5 weeks, they didn't have a bus driver. And then we have a bus driver, but you know what they do? Because we're not Columbus City Schools, they put us in the back end. So what they'll do is they'll give our bus drivers to Columbus City so they can take their students, and then they'll call us around 8:30, 9:15. Oh, we have a bus for you guys now. And it takes them 20 minutes just to get to the bus stop. So again, I'm not here to bash Columbus City Schools because I understand everybody is having issues with transportation. But I'm just begging you, if you can't get the transportation together, at least do some type of notification that will give the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, someone to know that there's no bus, the bus is late, they'll be picking them up. We do not need children walking the streets, not having a place to go. This affects them mentally. This discourages them. And that's the last thing we need. So thank you for taking this time. I'm grateful and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Overstreet. We appreciate your advocacy and definitely share a lot of the frustration that you have lifted. We're going to go ahead and try the next speaker. That speaker is Lakeisha Jefferson. Topic, transportation concerns, board action, get better and improve the process for transportation. There has to be checks and balances. Okay, it looks like we are not able to connect with her right now. So we might try her a little later, board members, since I did move this item up. So Ms. Nichols, I think you can hear me. Go ahead and we'll just maybe try her a little bit later in the meeting. Give her the opportunity since this was the later posted on the agenda. Okay, she said okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on then. We're to our internal auditor. You don't have a report, but good evening.
Good evening. I do not have a report this evening, so give you some time back.
Thank you. All right, over to our treasurer. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll take all that time, thank you.
Yes, you will.
Probably very disappointing to hear that, isn't it? Well, I have a couple of reports for you this evening. The first one is the quarterly financial report, first quarter, ending September 30. Just a reminder how the written report is laid out, which was attached to the agenda. It begins with a high-level executive summary, and then the next section breaks out the major revenue and expenditure categories. And then for those of you who want some more detail, you go into the latter part of the report, and you'll see the actual revenue and expenditure line item analysis, which is done pretty much in the format of the 5-year forecast. On a quarter-to-date, year-to-date basis at this point, you'll see the total revenues are running just under $20 million above plan. Total expenditures are now running about $24 million below plan, and that's driven the cash balance to almost $44 million above plan at the end of this quarter. When we look at revenues, property tax revenues are about $2.8 million or 1% below plan through the quarter. Last year at this time, we'd received about $256.1 million. This year, we're at $256.8 million. So you can see that at least for this settlement period, it's not increased a lot, but it's in that range that property taxes just on their own just don't increase a lot year over year. State aid, very much spot on through the quarter, $208,000 under plan on about $44 million received. So that's about a 0.5% variance. Just note for you that in the month of October, you know that we begin the year with ODE using last year's data, and then in October they start rolling in current year data on enrollment and expenses that reported last year that affect this year's funding. So in October we should see some changes in that state aid formula, and certainly we'll see how that runs against plan for the next quarter. But last year at this time, we were at about $35 million, and this year we're at $44 million received year to date. Transfers in are running about $2.9 million under plan, but we do expect that transfer to come in later months. Whoops, I'm sorry. I moved for me. I'm right here. I'm right on this graph. I'm just explaining the first quarter variances. Okay?
Okay.
You all right? Okay. So transfer in should come in the next few months in this quarter. The real driver is other revenue. Again, it goes back to pilots and the rush to complete those agreements before the new law kicked in. They're running about $25.6 million above plan. Certainly, we don't expect this above plan behavior to continue later on in the year, and certainly not in the coming years. As an example, year to date, we've received $32 million in other revenue categories. Last year, we were at $6 million. The next few graphs just display the dollar variance and then also the percentage variance. There we go. And that'll become more meaningful as other quarters come by, so we can track the variances quarter to quarter. When we get into expenditures, again, they're about $24.2 million total under plan. $20 million of that is in the area of personnel, and obviously we're looking into that. Part of that is the construction of the plan. We kind of spread personnel evenly throughout the year, but we know that the first few months, because it's a run out of last year, should be lower. So part of it's planned construction. Part of it can be open positions at this point in time. So we watch this pretty closely month to month, so that we know whether this is going to bear itself out for the fiscal year. Last year at this time, had spent about $131 million. This year, we're at $161 million, and that's a 3-pay differential. It was a 3-pay this month, or this quarter in September. Last year, it didn't occur until October, which is in the next quarter. So even though I do this quarterly to even out those variances, that 3-pay month is one thing that sometimes can jump in between quarters. Operating non-personnel, about $6.7 million under plan, but not a whole lot more than last year. Last year, we were about $30.2 million. This year, we're running at $32.4 million. The non-operating, non-personnel item, about $2.7 million above plan. We hit $40.8 million this year. We were only $5.5 million last year, but that's because we did the capital budget transfer of $36.6 million in this quarter. So again, the variances, dollar variances, and percent variances, again, that'll make much more sense and be more meaningful as we get additional quarters on the book. So total revenues up, total expenditures down through the quarter. We have about $43 million more than we had anticipated at the end of the quarter, and that pretty much does it for the quarter. Finance Committee meeting will meet. Finance Committee will meet in next week, and we'll go over the October results, and then I'll see you again. I think in about 3 months, which should be January. Is that the next time I do a quarterly report? It's January or February. I'll see you after the first of the year for the next quarterly report here. So that concludes the report on the quarterly financials. Be glad to answer or attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions on the quarterly report? Seeing no questions.
Cool. So the next report, as it gets loaded up, the next report is a further discussion of the 5-year forecast. See, last time my clicker didn't work, but now my clicker is working. There we go. All right. 5-year forecast, our November projection. As you will recall, at the last board meeting, I presented the forecast to you and all the major underlying assumptions. I did a meeting early because there was some significant changes from May, and the forecast was doing its job in indicating to us as management, you as the board, that there's a time to consider some things and plan for some action here to address the shortfalls or deficits that are projected in the forecast. So when we concluded the meeting last time, I posed some questions to you over the 3 kind of major driving categories of this forecast. It has to do with state aid and our assumptions about the phase-in of the new formula. And I say the phase-in because the other factors that are in there are declining enrollment and the changes in state share really aren't ones that you can assume away at this point, but because I chose to not assume that or I would assume that the phase-in doesn't continue, that's an assumption you could question. And then I also noted that there is a $15 million transportation penalty annually included in the forecast, and should we continue to keep that in or not. On the personnel side, the major thing here had to do with what is the assumption for base increases outside of a collective bargaining agreement. Heretofore, it's been 1%. I thought that was not a reasonable assumption to make, given our experience, and that I had increased that to 2.5%, and just as a placeholder, if you will. Question about ESSER funding. You have quite a few positions at ESSER, and what's the plan to bring them over to the general fund, or not to bring them over, or to bring them over but net funded at 0? Those are big questions. But what do you put in here just as what's the picture that you want to paint? And this picture that we paint now pretty much sets the stage for the discussions that we'll have internally on things that we have to do to address the deficits. And last but certainly not least is the capital budget funding. You want to put it in the general fund? I'm assuming you do want to fund a capital budget in some way. So we either put it into the general fund or not. You have another option. You can do a permanent improvement levy, which we've proposed to you before. You can put it in for the forecast, and later, if you put it on the ballot and it passes, you take it out of the forecast. So these are very macro level assumptions. We're just going to set the stage for future discussions, first internally, and then more of what you hear from us in the spring when we actually get into our budgeting process for '23. Yeah, that's not, we got to move forward because I hope they've got the right presentation. The guys in the back, can you jump to I think it's like slide 53 because you might have the wrong file. So even without the slide up there, let me tell you what my last presentation did. I'm sure it caused a lot of thought and conversation amongst you. Several of you have contacted me. But equally as important, it precipitated a lot of conversation internally and having a conversation at the cabinet level about what does this forecast mean, what would we as administration recommend those assumptions to be, and how's that going to impact our behavior. And so if we get this presentation back and running at some point, I have two proposals for you tonight and one that I'm going to recommend. You can discuss amongst yourself if you want and here at the table and change those if you want. But let me go through what we came up with and the picture that we believe is an appropriate one to paint. The first one had a target of making, as you recall, we go negative in fiscal 25, negative cash in fiscal 25. So 25, 26, and 27, the last 3 years of the forecast, are negative cash. Felt that the first target would be, let's make 25 positive. Why? Because, well, we can't sign contracts that extend into 25. And with a reasonable change in the assumptions, you can assume that a problem away. Because, again, this is not really a firm, in concrete plan for action, but it's a framework that then we as administration have to go back and work within. So the first modification we did was to make fiscal year 25 positive. The state aid assumption, we made no change. No phase in, transportation penalty stays in. Leave that in. If something happens down the road in about 4 months, great. But for now, we're going to leave that in. On the personnel side, no change. The 2.5's in, the 5-year staffing plan is in, and I left the 88 FTE and ESSER coming over to the general fund. That's not going to make a big impact in this analysis one way or the other. But we did change the capital budgeting. I mean, I told you the capital budget was kind of like low-hanging fruit. It's easy to do that. You don't have a capital budget now. You did do the 36.6, mind you, so you've got that 40 million over there. Those are the 4 we did last year. But ongoing basis, let's make at least a token effort in trying to get that up and running and get it funded. So you reduce it to 20 from 40. So the simple change in that assumption that the capital budget would be funded at 20 instead of 40 would allow me to present to you in 2 weeks a 5-year forecast with fiscal year 25 as positive. The next target we used was, well, what's it going to take to get 26 positive? So that until the last year, the forecasts were positive, and then 27 will go negative, but that's 4 years out, and quite frankly, the nasty gram we might get from ODE isn't as severe. All right, so we can avoid that. So as we went through these assumptions, again, state aid, we didn't change. And this one is very similar. Board Member Vera pointed this out, asked me some questions before the meeting. This is very similar to what I sent you for the getting 26 positive, but we internally have suggested a tweaking of lines. State aid, no change in our assumption. Personnel, the 2.5 is fine, but let's just take the ESSER out. We'll figure out what we do with personnel down the road in the next couple of months as we get into budgeting. The capital budget's at 20. But in order to make 26 positive, we have to do something else with the general fund budget. So the first thing is when we go into budgeting, we would hold 24 and the years beyond at that point. at the 23 level. We just zero fund, not zero fund them, but zero change, flat fund them, if you will. And what that'll do is it causes us even more to take a real, pencil sharpened look at those budgets, what's in, what's out. We'll find out real quick during the process. If you're not going to get the increases that you had asked for this past spring, if you're flat funded, what's that mean? What aren't we going to do? So that'll be that process. So that's the first recommended change in the assumption. Secondly, in order to get 26 positive, we're looking at about 35 million in additional reductions starting in 24 from somewhere. Now, in the forecast, I put it all on non-personnel. I put it in the purchase services line. That doesn't mean that's where it's going to end up. But in the budgeting process, we know you're flat funded on non-personnel. You've got to figure out where another 35 is going to come from. And the big question is, what are we going to do with our personnel needs in general? The 5-year staffing plan, the ESSER positions, and whatnot. This all sets a stage for a very intense, sharpened pencil, surgical look at our budgeting process in the spring, because we're going to do personnel and non-personnel together at the same time. So we had a meeting just this morning with Cabinet and went through all of this, and I think we all landed on let's make 26 positive so that we can sign contracts. You've got some other collective bargaining coming up. Let's go ahead and make 26 positive, knowing full well that there are some things that we need to do in order to make that happen. Don't have to do it tomorrow, but we know that the conversations and the work on it has to start tomorrow. So that's my presentation to you. I'm sorry that we don't have the right file to see those bullet points, but the conclusion is that I'm recommending to you that this last set of assumptions that I just described to you to make 26 be projected at a positive level be what I bring back to you in 2 weeks. Then the next step in that, Dr. Dixon, Cabinet, my budget team, start putting, the old phrase of putting pencil to paper, collecting data, doing the analysis, and doing a very hard look at, what do we need to do? What do we have to stop doing? I used Mr. Cole's phrase about building capacity. Do we have the capacity to do what we need to do? What's that about? And really begin to attach a real good understanding of dollars to what we're actually doing programmatically, so that we know that we just can't come in and say, cut 35 million or 25 million or 10 million, whatever it is, without a real good understanding of what that means from what we do or don't do operationally. So it's a challenging time, but it's an exciting time because you really get to focus in on those kinds of things. So that's my recommendation to you tonight. I didn't mean to usurp your discussion or get to the end of it without having your input, but this is where we landed as administration. Very similar to what FAC had to say, and I think it's defensible and makes a lot of sense. So that's it. You can take it from there.
Okay, so we are going to open the floor to discussion. I think before we do that, I kind of want to just make sure that we're level set on the process. And so Stan and Chair Cole jump in with it. So right now, just so everyone understands, when we are talking about these assumptions, we are looking at the big, broad picture, and it's kind of like a weather forecast, right? We're trying to forecast out where we're going to be, hitting certain marks, because ODE wants to know, and and the treasurer mentioned signing contracts. I mean, we have to make sure that we can uphold our commitments over the years that we have established those legally. But just like a weather forecast, and Stan says this all the time, things will change. But we need to paint the picture first so that we can start to work under that and build the budgets. And those budgets are built every year. And as we're building those, we have other things that come up and things that the board and the voters will decide that will then impact the forecast and impact the next steps. And so just like a weather forecast, you get further into Friday and you kind of can hone in and you know more because you have more data and information and should I take the umbrella? And so that's kind of what this process is. So we talk about things, and I'm saying this for the team too, because we hear the treasurer say, flatlining budgets and finding places to save $35 million, right? That's very real, and we need to be aware of that, but that is not what this board wants to do. And we want to fight, and we want to make sure our community understands what our needs are so that we can fully fund this district at the levels that we need operationally, academically, and facility-wise. And so that is my personal commitment, and I know my fellow board members will probably make those commitments themselves, but I just want to reassure, especially our team, because it can be scary sitting in those rooms talking about it. We are going to have to talk about it. We're going to have to make plans, but that's what the forecast is designed to do. And so, it's a legal requirement. We have to do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that when it comes down to it,
That's hidden.
we are, reducing staff or anything like that. That is certainly that is not what we're saying in this moment. When we get to those situations, if for some reason voters decide not to pass our levies or support us in the ways that we need them, then we will have those discussions. But that's what the treasurer's office and the team does. They set the forecast. They help us come up with these assumptions to figure out what's in, what's out, what's realistic to set the parameters around the decisions that we're making. So I just want to make sure, and jump in, Stan, jump in, Board Member Cole, as kind of a higher level set to our community, to our staff, to the people watching, because I know that these conversations get a little bit, and I also don't want the organization, I'm talking to all of our staff right now, let's not infight. We're not going to infight. Everybody's jobs, everybody's roles, everybody is important. And I know that in certain times in the history of this district, we have had to, for certain reasons, slash and cut certain areas. This board is really trying to make a commitment to look at everything holistically because we know that everything is important to our students' success. And so I am personally making that commitment as I am reviewing this data and information. And I just want us all to make sure we stay part of the same team because I know sometimes it then feels like you're fighting against each other. We're not. Chair Cole.
Thank you for those comments, Madam President. So first and foremost, I want to add to the legal aspect of what you spoke of. I think it's important that those who may not know at the table, and certainly those who may not know listening, that we can only incorporate what we have hard dollars. We cannot incorporate prospective money. We can only incorporate what we actually have in revenue. We cannot incorporate what we do not have in revenue. What we do not have in revenue is any levy or bond that was passed, that will be passed, that we're trying to plan to pass. We cannot incorporate that into a 5-year forecast. Folks have to understand that. The other piece is this budget is not about its inputs. It is not about inputs. The budget is about children. The budget is about providing children everything they possibly need that we can to succeed. That's what the budget is. If I'm not speaking for all of us in that sense, please let me know. But I firmly believe as chair of this committee, I firmly and fervently believe as a member of this august body of leaders that our budget is about our children. Period. End of report, as Gloria Walker Kennedy used to say. That was my grandmother. So I'm in firm support of what Stan is saying. So as we're talking about solvency and the question of solvency and what this means in terms of preparing, I think taking those measured steps, because we're only as prepared to do that as we're knowledgeable about what the administration shares with us. So if you all share with us that we're able to actually, provide things that are aligned with our goals. We've been able to prioritize them in a way and understand what its ultimate impact is going to be on student achievement. This is where we make the pivot. This is where we bob and weave in the fight, so to speak. So I'm in total agreement with the direction of how do we look at solvency very realistically, and most importantly, how do we do it in the most measured sense to ensure that we're in full fidelity with what we promised our children, what we promised them. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I open it to more direct questions and direct thoughts on the proposal, are there any more high-level comments by board members? Board Member Brown?
Thank you. Thank you. And I've been obviously giving this some thought since the Finance Committee meeting where we've heard the 5-year forecast and had a robust discussion with some really good, smart people that are serving on that committee, public members of that committee. But also thinking back over my years of school board service, which are enough, to what I've learned and how we need to approach this. Our job, in my view, as a board, is to provide the best education possible for each and every student to the extent that we can afford it, and to work at raising funds and obtaining funds in the best way we possibly can so that we can provide that highest quality education. What that means is working at all of those various pieces, the state, the federal, the local, but we have the greatest impact on local funding. And we have to be thoughtful about what our community is willing to fund. And we want to ask for and seek that out to the extent possible. But at some point, we have to evaluate where that's going to be and plan accordingly. I also understand that part of our role, an important part, is to be good fiscal stewards of the public dollars that we are entrusted with. We have to be smart. We have to spend wisely. And we want to focus that to the extent possible on our students and their education. And it's important, but we can't spend money that we don't have. The way Michael put it is an excellent way. Only what we actually have, hard dollars or on paper, are the dollars we can spend. I believe that our educators, our teachers, all want to do the best possible job and provide this high-quality education for every student. Our administrators, the same. All of our employees want to do their best. But again, that's something that we have to oversee and know that we want to provide all the dollars possible, but we can't make it up. And I think that the plan that Stan has outlined about staying in the positive through 26, about making adjustments as we need to be able to achieve that, and spending wisely is something that we absolutely must do and are required to do. Some of it may be challenging, and we've not been unwilling to face challenges in lots of areas, and this is simply another one. And at the same time as we're doing this, we have to be looking forward to plan for what we believe our community is willing to afford and what we can put on the ballot in the near future. Because that's clearly warranted, clearly where we are. I don't think anybody would disagree from that. I know I've got some personal preference on the capital side in terms of let's get those dollars out of our operating fund It's what we tried to do. We took a first step some years back with a $500,000 permanent improvement, and we achieved that. We got that, but it's not enough. We now have a much better idea of how much we really need, the $40 million. And one of the things on our plate is that we need to figure out how we get that $40 million so that it's not competing with operating dollars for kids' attention. And we're going to need operating levy. There's no question about that. The question is when and how much. And third, we're going to need to move forward in the near future with our facilities planning. We've got a great plan that we've put together with a lot of work from a lot of people, the community and others. But until we pass some bond issue, there's no way we can move forward on it. We can't build with speculative money that we hope to get. So those are my thoughts, and I think, you know, from a big picture level, the recommendation that you're making may not be pleasing to everybody's ears right now or next year, but it's what we have to do.
Thank you, Board Member Brown. We have now the assumptions up on the board. So if we want to take a look at those and kind of dig in, so Stan can get some feedback about the assumptions. And this is the one we're seeing that is the staff in your recommendation?
That's correct.
Okay. So members, that is what is up there. If you want to take a look at it. And Board Member Beckerly, you can do big, and then if you have something very more specific on the assumptions, you can roll into that.
I don't have anything specific on the assumptions. I think they make sense. My big ideas, my student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. That change begins with us. So I think at the board level, I'd like to pick up on Dr. Pierce's point with transportation and take the same approach to what can we do politically with the State House. And it occurs to me that, you know, we talk about this a lot, and I think we actually have to do it. There's other, I didn't realize there's a Big 8 lobbyist. Somebody mentioned the Big 8 lobbyist tonight. You know, there's got to be other boards that are in a similar situation. You know, I think we can start with trying to influence the governor's budget before it even goes to the State House. And then from there, you know, really find our voices about this in terms of the fully funding, in terms of that, the factor that gets applied. What's that called?
The state share.
The state share. And I think we need to find our voice. I think because, you know, Dr. Pierce was also saying, like, we need to make this a political statement. We need to have some headlines talking about how hamstrung we are with what was supposed to be the solution. And because of how it's being implemented, it's leaving us in a difficult situation. I think creativity in terms of, and it's not a macro solution at all, but there are other ways we can, you know, piece together ways to fund things. In terms of, you know, this is my fantasy, but going back to some of the our community partners with whom we've had abatements and say, you know, you want to be a community member, we did our part, now can you fund a certain number of, you know, we have, say, all right, say for example, we're starting to implement this restorative practices work that AJ's been working with, and we need some dedicated people to shepherd those processes in our buildings. So then we create a fellowship that's the, you know, so-and-so corporation fellowship, and they're, you know, and it's not going to be a macro level thing, but if we can piece together bits and pieces of smaller creative ways to chip away at some of our requirements that are, you know, or that align with the mission, you know, Children's Hospital, we may be able to do some joint stuff there and get some social emotional stuff and some of the things that we need. But I think we need to be really thinking in those terms, both because it will have some financial impact and because it's a better story when we have to go to the voters, that we've been doing things creatively, we've been thinking differently. You know, the latest thing I've been nosing around in is new market tax credits, and I don't know if it's a real opportunity or not, but we have to make sure we're thinking about that, and that's different. You know, so I think that I want to encourage us as a board to do the political aspect of this, and also the organization to be keeping and not be afraid, not to be afraid to just go knock on somebody's door and say, let's do this or let's do that. So that's my big picture thought.
Yeah, thank you. And so I want to bring the conversation back to what Stan needs. This is all very important, but it's kind of back to Michael's point about the money we don't yet have.
Yeah.
And this is, we need to do all of those things, and, you know, and we have other plans. So looking at, in order to make the assumptions for this forecast, what he has up there, are there any questions, concerns, things that we need to know? He's asking for our input. He's got a lot of it from the team already. Anything up here giving you heartburn, board members? Board Member Vera.
So President Adair, thank you. I guess for me, it's more of the ESSER, not rolling ESSER. I understand, but I guess for me, I want to get an idea of a timeline as to when we're really going to assess the effectiveness of all the ESSER positions we've added. And I know many of them are majorly important, but we need to, I feel like we need to know what that is so that we can assess and account for, you know, how many positions are we talking about? Because to me, not accounting for that, I understand it for the purpose of this exercise, but I feel like we need to have a realistic number and a number soon, because this funding is running out. And if we are able to quantify how many of these positions are positions we have to keep, like we can't just do away with, we then have to have the larger conversation of how do we sustain that? And if that's coming out of the general fund, we need to know that sooner rather than later, to not make the assumption of not having anything in the ESSER bucket. That concerns me, because I know there's good work happening in that ESSER space, and not accounting for it. To me personally, I'm a little uneasy about that.
Well, and let me just say this. This set of assumptions provides that backdrop, so that if after you do this analysis, say, we need to move 100 positions over, then we know right now, well, this said 0, you're doing 100. What line, kind of like what we were just talking about, I showed you some lines on there, and I said, well, we changed this line for this line. So if they come back and say 100 ESSER positions need to come over, then it's, what are we doing? Are we not doing the 5-year staffing plan? Are we cutting non-personnel budgets more? We've got to make room for that up until the time we have, as Board Member Cole and Board Member Brown said, a definitive, we pass a levy in 24, well, now our budgeting changes. Right. Okay? It opens the opportunity for that. So relative to ESSER, this just says, this isn't really our plan to do that, because we're not sure what we want to do yet. Yeah. But having it not in here at least alerts us to the fact that when we use this as the backdrop, every time you do something, if you, even a non-personnel, if they come back and go, we can't flat fund this, we've got to do this, well, fine, then we need to find it somewhere else. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Created that backdrop for that give and take, and you kind of have to, because we can't supplement the budget, we've got to supplant the budget items. Maybe that's a good way to put it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right. So that's some of the discussions that we had today. We know that there are some jobs that some positions that we want to keep. And some of those, we reported early on that we have some researchers who are doing some analysis for us on what are those positions that we want to keep. So we have that information is forthcoming. And so all of the departments, our chiefs are looking at their departments and what positions we want to keep, which ones are key, and then what positions are no longer relevant, our current positions, right? Because we've been doing some new work with utilizing these positions with ESSER. So that is forthcoming. So we made some changes today based on, I think the old one said 85 positions.
88.
88 positions. And we stated, no, it could be more than 88 positions.
it seems.
Right, so we don't know yet, but we're working on what those positions are.
So then my follow-up to that question then is Treasurer, what is the absolute, like, I guess, what's the deadline to know? Because I also don't want it to be, we're collecting, but if we need to have, for your ability to plan, is there a threshold as to, like, I really need this answer by this particular period so that we can be forecasting, with integrity about what we need?
Going to President Dare's, I thought, very appropriate example, it's like forecasting the weather. And this is Ohio in so many ways when it comes to that. Each one of these pieces probably has a little bit different time frame. If you're going to make a significant contribution to this solution in terms of non-personnel general fund expenditures, that's within the next 3 months because we're planning for 23, 24 in the next 3 months. For non-personnel. When it comes to personnel, it depends on when you're going to take those actions. ESSER money doesn't run out until the end of fiscal 24. Well, when do you have to plan for fiscal 24 staffing? So fiscal 24 is in the fall of 23, right? Yes, 23, 24. So you're going to be doing some things, some staffing here coming up very soon as well. So I would say you're going to have to know by this, February about what we're doing in some way, because you've got contractual obligations, Article 211, if you've heard of that, those kinds of things going on. So we need to know what that staffing for 24 is going to look like at the end. But the impact is if the positions come or go, they're rolling in fiscal 25 because the money runs out in 24. So that's then a year away. So it'd be great to have a plan at the beginning here in the next 3 months, but the hardcore plan for 25, when they've rolled off, doesn't occur until a year from this coming February. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it kind of speaks to the framework of what this board is working on in terms of our goals and our guardrails. And so making sure that our budgets and everything really does match our operational goals, match our programmatic goals. And so I appreciate you mentioning that early on, as far as even with our personal expenditures, making sure that what we're hiring for is a part of the overarching plan. And how does that, fall into our buildings? And so I appreciate that we are starting to move in that space. And I rather, for me personally, know up front so that we can plan up front and not wait so late in the game to really assess, what is our personnel needs, what are our programmatic needs, because we have larger conversations that we need to have in regards to the landscape of our district. And so these numbers play a part in how we make those decisions.
So hopefully I don't misspeak here, but my expectation is that we do the planning. Dr. Dixon and her team do the academic planning, and we assist on the financial side. And what will come back to you in the spring is what that plan looks like. So I'm not, we can have that conversation tangentially, but I'm not expecting you folks to plan that for us.
Oh, no, we have no desire to do
Okay,
that
all right,
either.
all right. I just
to be
wanted to make
clear.
sure. Not that
But we just want to see the connection
Yep,
behind how we're spending in regards to the goals and the guardrails and what we are saying to the community is a priority. We can't tell the community the goals and the guardrails are our priority and our operational or our budgets don't match that.
Right. Somebody once said to me, don't tell me what you believe in.
Show
Show
me
me
what
where
you
you spend your
believe.
money.
Absolutely.
And that's true. But that connection was a key topic today at Cabinet. I mean, it came through loud and clear about making that connection, that you don't present this piece of the plan without this piece of the plan, and it's tied together. So that's been heard. I this might be my concluding comment, who knows, but the 5-year forecast, and I didn't do it this time. I usually run through ODE's explanation of what a 5-year forecast is supposed to do. This is what a 5-year forecast is supposed to do. It raises that conversation. It raises the conversation in administration. And then as time passes, we do something. Don't know exactly what that's going to be, but we're having that conversation. And so to me, I'm like, I want to say, well, my work's done here. I got that conversation, this forecast got the conversation going. So it's really good. It was a great, it was good this morning.
Okay, we're going to go Pierce, Brown, Cole.
Thank you so much for this report. While we've been tasked to respond to the major assumptions that are made, I want to echo what Board Member Vera has indicated in her responses, in that we have an incomplete report to make a solid decision on. And we can look at these numbers and have no issues, which most of us are saying we don't have issues. What we need to know is how these numbers are going to impact our children when they walk into the classroom, how these numbers are going to impact our teachers. We are dealing with a transportation situation where our students aren't even arriving to school, which one could then say we need to look at. Are we consolidating schools? Are we moving away from the district-wide open enrollment that we are having? We're going to have some very serious conversations if we want these dollars to align in a way that will really put students first and at the center. So while my remarks aren't related to these assumptions, because again, I have no issues with the assumptions are what they are. Our treasurer has done due diligence in making sure that they're there. The task then lies with our treasurer and our administration to bring to the table a thorough, explicit, detailed, strategic analysis of how these numbers are going to affect everything from the number of paper towels we got in the bathroom to the number of buses and the gas that's going in them.
Yes. Board Member Brown.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment briefly about the ESSER funding and the positions that are involved with that. And hearing Christina talk about the importance of those makes me think. And yes, those are very important things that we use those dollars for. But, and this district, more than most that I've seen across the state and the country, has made wise use of ESSER dollars. There are lots of local governments that gave back money that they couldn't find uses for. I mean, I wish some of that could come our way. But the reality is, this was one-time money. We knew it at the time we accepted it. We knew it at the time that we created the positions and filled the positions that we did with those dollars, knowing at that time, at the front end, that we'd have to find a way that this money was not going to continue, in perpetuity, like levies, but that it was going to drop off in a few years. And this day of reckoning with respect to those dollars is nearly upon us, and we've got to start acting on that. I'd love to be able to do all those things, and I hope we can and will. They're important, I agree. But we'll have to find ways to pay for those things.
Could I just temper what you said about a good use of the ESSER dollars? So we've requested analysis of how the Power On, or was it Power Up, the 250 hours that teachers were able to accrue or use for their ESSER dollars to help student achievement. We haven't seen the data on that. So I would temper us saying that we've made good use of those dollars, because I, as a board member, have not seen how those programs connected or correlated with achievements in the classroom. I look forward to seeing it.
I agree, I understand. I'm thinking, I guess I came from thinking in terms of the local governments that turned back dollars because they couldn't figure out a way to use them.
Okay, we're not going to have a
That's
side
shameful.
discussion, board members. I let it go. I let them go a little bit over there too, but seek recognition. And so, Board Member Brown, you still have the floor. Are you finished with your questions?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to go to Cole. I just recognized, you don't have to say a side comment to me, Dr. Pierce. I just recognized I allowed them to do it a little bit over there. I allowed you to do it, even though I did not recognize you. And you guys are going back and forth. We're not going to do that. So just seek recognition. The next up is Board Member Cole. If you would like to speak again, I can write your name down. Okay, Dr. Pierce. Remember Cole.
I thank you. I defer. I just wanted to make sure we focus back on our assumptions. It looks like we're all on the same page with regards to that and the process to establishing what the community's priorities are. I just also want to remind us that we're focused on what the community told us is priority, that we then created a strategic plan and design around. That's it, but I thank you.
I have a question about the ESSER as well, and I hear my colleagues, but I also hear the superintendent saying that there are, even though we don't know exactly, there are some positions we know that we need. And I'm hearing you say that it could be because we are actually just re-looking at the budget itself and what we have existing, and we might change positions but the point was also we were going to test things and see what worked. And so I just want to make sure, kind of back to Board Member Rivera's point, to me that's like a big zero. And I don't know if a zero is a correct assumption if we know that we actually have some, even though we don't exactly know, but you have a pool that you know that we're going to need. But saying that, I'm also saying that as part of this same, even with a no ESSER, an assumption that there is some sort of reduction in 24. And so we don't know exactly where that's going to be. But playing with the ESSER, if we put even something in that bucket, what then would it do to that either reduction number, or what would it do if we moved the capital budget down, which kills me to say that, but I also am a firm believer in our money that we're going to get, that we're going to get the PI because this is where our community told us they support. But if we pull the capital budget down, not to zero, because I still want to demonstrate a commitment to funding it, could we somehow get to an ESSER that's also not a zero? Because I'm hearing you already saying that it's some sort of assumption that something in that, somebody in that that's being paid for is already being contemplated that it will be part of a budget. Am I saying all that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess because I know you had I know you all talked about it today. So maybe you can help me through how or why nothing is proposed there. Why is ESSER's a zero?
First, we wanted to maintain a commitment to capital. 20 was a number that we talked about at FAC. It worked in the fiscal 25. How do we make it positive? To take it from 40 to 20. So it was simple enough. Let's just leave that at 20 and then look at the other pieces and what do they have to do in order, given this, then let's go to this one and see what happens there. I think the reason why I would leave ESSER at zero is because it's a personnel item that is a large item in our budget. And to be honest, it holds our feet to the fire to say if you want to add people and change these assumptions, you need to find a way to fund them. I'm sorry. I usually say something to indicate that I was done speaking, but I was done speaking. That was it. I think it, on the personnel side, it just holds our feet to the fire and keeps it at our top-of-mind awareness that when we deal with personnel, it absolutely has ramifications in other pieces and parts. And I would not want to go in and say, well, let's plug in 200, know that we have to cut, 300 million over here. It gets disjointed. I would rather focus on these are the personnel actions that we want to take in terms of additions to general fund, and therefore that complete discussion is how do we fund that? Does that make sense? But that's just my strategy.
Yeah.
Does that make?
Yeah, that's pretty much where we were. And then also we looked at, we understand that the organization is changing and has changed. And the ESSER positions allowed us the flexibility to think about how can we help our students differently and really create positions that were time bound, right? We knew they were only for 3 to 4 years. It gave us the opportunity to test these positions. And then we come back and say, we need more of this. We know the SEL, that we know we need more of those positions. Many of those positions are now in ESSER. So when now we go back and look at our priorities, look at the board goals and guardrails, to your earlier points, these positions have to, reflect those strategies. So we wanted enough opportunities to look and see exactly what the need is. So that's why we went back. And we don't want a lot of additional positions that we don't need. So if we really go back in our departments and say, we don't need 10 of this cup, whatever, I don't want to say a position, people get worried, right?
Right.
Yeah, we don't want 10 of that, but we really need this because that goes back to a whole child focus. That goes back to our board goal number 1. How do we ensure that we keep the whole child focused? What does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to have these additional people that we know that this strategy works, and these are the team members that we need. So it goes back to your earlier points. Yes, there is alignment. Yes, we're taking the time to look at that more closely, align that to our budget and to our to our staffing and our resources, and that is forthcoming, and that's what we talked about at length, about 2 hours this morning in scheduling the next steps.
Okay, so I kind of look at these assumptions and us setting this for the treasurer as kind of our guardrails, right?
Yeah.
And I know that this changes behavior because you are all going to react to it. And so I guess what I'm hearing you saying is you've already had those conversations internally, and the understanding about what you just said, these positions that we've tested that we know we want to keep. You're going to work through that in your budgeting process, and you're saying, board, we don't need that as a guardrail because we got it. We know how to implement it in our budgeting process as we're doing strategies, what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Okay. All right, from that, we have Cole and then Beckerly.
Well, I'm somewhat on the same page as you.
Okay.
My only thing is, and it's actually in accordance to what we've committed to in terms of monitoring, and the 2 cases that both of my colleagues have made this evening, both Dr. Pierce and Ms. Vera, and that we need to monitor these things. Perhaps this is now the monitoring that takes place moving forward to tell us very actively what has been effective and what has not been effective, if that's making any sense.
Yeah.
I think that's what helps us on our very, as you have stated, macro level of observation and guidance.
Right.
I think that helps us.
Thank you. And a little bit too, because after we do a monitoring session, the board is asking, what do you need? So we're thinking about those needs too as we think about our staffing. And also, remember, we're just now going through our first year of our board goals and reporting out what we need, right? So we're aligning those and being responsive to that too. And then it's also allowing us to kind of think about maybe some positions that we don't need. So from the personnel side, now we know we've used ESSER dollars for programming. For example, go back to the Power On, those were dollars that we used for stipend, but specific to personnel, we're looking at closely at the personnel that we have and making sure that we have enough people in the right positions that are aligned to the outcomes that we want for our students.
I still think that this is an interim guardrail opportunity for us to monitor.
Okay.
And stay on top of, no question.
And I think it goes to that that underfunded. Remember that guardrail that you have that the board will now allow the superintendent to have. I think it's
Straight up.
It's straight out with another current guardrail that you have.
I thank you.
Board Member Beckerly.
I appreciate the sentiment of having 0 in ESSER right now so that we can be really intentional about what positions we keep and don't keep and really thoughtful about it in a way that I suspect we haven't been thoughtful in terms of how we put our budget together to that detail. But I'm picking up on something that Board President Adair said, which is we know it's not really 0. And I suppose that as long as we all understand that this is how we're going about it, and the benefit of starting at zero for the intentionality in the budget is worthwhile, I'm wondering a bit, though. You know, in theory, the goals and the guardrails will force decisions that are aligned. And that should be the winning the day in terms of the budget we end up with and how many ESSER positions we actually get and where we decide to cut other things if we have to or find money elsewhere. I'm a little worried about, are we really there culturally yet? Because we can say that here, but when everybody's going down and looking at their budgets, are they like, well, I can't really ask for this ESSER because it's zero in the budget and, you know, there's no money there for that now, or if I do this, they're going to make me cut something over here. Like, there's that mind, you know, we have to really be careful that our old culture doesn't force us to make, you know, like the people making, you know, especially when you go down deeper, are going to be making budget proposals based on a mentality that we don't want them to have anymore. And I don't know that putting money in the ESSER solves that problem necessarily. But we would hate for the message to be, the board's going to be really not, you know, happy about ESSER positions because they put zero in it, so we better not propose any.
Right.
That's kind of how we've acted in the past. So we have to make sure we're not acting that way anymore.
I was just going to say, I'm not hearing that message.
Yeah.
No.
The message that well, because I'm delivering the message, so of course I'm hearing it correctly, is that you need to have a pretty detailed, cogent plan for the positions.
Yep.
And whether it's ESSER positions
Exactly.
or any other positions,
But what I'm
that conversation should go on.
And I guess that has to filter down several levels in our organization for it to be different. And maybe it's just let's make sure we get that message through loud and clear.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've heard over several years that people are not asking for what they want, that we're trying to do more with less.
Yes.
Right, so you're absolutely right. I think if we think of it as what do we need to educate our students, regardless of what pot of money that is coming out of, right? And just thinking, this is what we need. We've been blessed to have this surplus dollars and ESSER, but we also have other funding, grant funds that we receive as well. So I think our team is looking at what do we actually need. And we talked about earlier with using a per pupil, I think something that they learned at this conference last week, looking at a per pupil expense, right? So when we're looking at this, how much is this really costing us to really fund these schools, these projects? So we are taking a deeper dive and looking at exactly what we want. And then the harder question too, we're asking ourselves, well, really what do we not need? And if we don't need it, then how do we get rid of it? And maybe it's through attrition, right? So there's ways that we can get at that and still have integrity of our program, still let our colleagues know in a timely fashion if we need to go in a different direction for whatever reason. But we're really taking a deep dive and making sure that these things are aligned, to your point.
And I think that maybe the way to think about it is, in the past, what we really needed never came to the board. And then the board didn't have to say, well, that's nice, but we can't afford it. And I think the board needs to know what we really need. And then if we have to say, well, sorry, we can't afford it, at least it's at the board level and it's being discussed, or that's when our feet are really to the fire to go figure out how to get the money for you. But if we never find out what we really need, you know, that's the thing.
Back to Board Member Cole, and then I will see, are there any other comments? All right, Board Member Cole, you'll be the last.
I'll defer.
Okay, you'll defer. Mr. Treasurer, do you feel like you have what you need?
Yes. I
Okay.
didn't hear anybody tell me that what's on the screen now that we proposed to make 26 positive is not the acceptable set of assumptions for the forecast today that I bring to you in 2 weeks. I've also heard that we got some planning to do.
Lots of plans.
And that's just the bottom line of it. The confluence of some of the financial issues just brought, shined a light on it a little bit hotter. But that's fine. That's fine. We get it. You will, within the next 6 months, and certainly at FAC we'll be talking about it, talk about the remaining piece, which is the revenue side. And so while you want to hear about what we want and positions and all of that, then the context is not just in the framework of the 5-year forecast as we've shown it here, and as Board Member Cole and Board Member Brown pointed out, it includes, they said known revenues, although there are some assumptions about revenues there that aren't known, but the implication is we can't count an injection of new funds from a levy, and that will be the next step after we do this budgeting process to say, here's our plan, here's what it looks like, here's the May forecast, and guess what? This is what it's going to do to a levy request. And you will then, and that is a decision, levies are a decision you make. So while I said we'll do the planning for the rest of it when we come back, and we'll say, we just did what you asked us to do, here's our plan. And so that would require X number of mills. And I think you've said this, Board Member Beckerly, numerous times, it's up to you to find that funding, either traditional or creative. It's a process. This works. This is good. We know where we are, and we'll get to it.
All right.
I appreciate the feedback, and this is really the first time that I've ever gone through this many. I've always gotten iterations of a forecast, but I've always just brought one, explained it, it seemed reasonable, and everybody moves on. But this was, for those of us that do this kind of budgeting and forecasting, it was fun to go through that conversation, because the conversation with all of you can be different than with it, the rest of the staff. So it was good. I like it. I'm pleased. So thank you very much for that. And I will do that. I will send out a forecast for your review prior to the meeting, and you can see that picture. Okay?
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move into item 7, board matters. The first is item 7.1, a resolution to approve the revisions to the Columbus Administrators Association compensation package. I don't know which one who's, okay, it's Board Member Vera has this resolution.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing revisions to the Columbus Administrators Association compensation package.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. Item 7.2, resolution to approve the revisions to the Columbus School Classified Supervisors Association compensation package. Board Member Beckerly.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing revisions to the Columbus Schools Classified Supervisions Compensation Package. Supervisors.
That's a motion. Is there a
Second.
second? It's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank all of our administrators and supervisors that serve our district for their hard work. And, just again, thank them. So I see you in the back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to now do the thing I promised last time, and that is have a discussion on our monitoring process. So I'm going to invite our cabinet members who maybe are participating in this to come up on screen to join us at the table, because this is going to be more of a discussion format. We took the questions that actually Board Member Brown last time kind of threw at you in a long line of succession, but they were great questions. So what I had our liaison do was send them back out so the staff could think about them. Board members, you have this in front of you as well, the questions. This is for all of us to talk about. So, we have started this process of a new governance model. We have, been working on it. We've had a lot of sticking points maybe as we have started the process. Just everyone come to the table. Like, we can pull up another table if we need to. And so I just want to kind of open it up because it has to work for the board, it needs to work for the team, and it's just kind of a good time to debrief and see how we're doing. So these are the questions that Board Member Brown posed last meeting about the SOGF model. They were, have you found it helpful? Or has it gotten in the way of your work? 2, has it revealed things that we wouldn't otherwise know? 3, have you observed any changes, especially positive, in the classroom between teachers and students? And I'd like you to also think about just your relationship between and communication about important things between administration and the board as kind of another layer here. So I think, board members, I'm going to ask you first, how would you like to hear from the team first, or would you all like to start the discussion and then hear them? Team first? Okay, so I'm going to open it to the team. I have no particular order. So whoever would like to share some ideas, let's start with the first question. Have you found it helpful or has it gotten in the way? What do we think? Don't be shy, because I know you're not.
Good evening. I think it has been very helpful. I've gone through the SOFG training, extensive training, and I think you guys did. It indicates your growth during your discussion about the budget, because you did bring up the monitoring process, goals and guardrails, and asking the right questions. Of course, the monitoring process gives the board the opportunity to evaluate the alignment between your goals and guardrails and where the district's students really are, the reality in regards to performance and growth. I think as time has gone on, of course, when I joined the district, we didn't have goals and guardrails. We didn't have any of those things, and I didn't think there was any real direction. I think there is an alignment between the board and administration now in regards to where everyone is headed. It's clear. The monitoring process is designed to be both objective and effective. And you have the goals, and the goals are the board's goals. And the administration is responsible for setting the strategies to reach those goals. And of course, the monitoring process allows the board to test those strategies and to ask the what, how, and why questions. So I'm not in the classroom, so I can't give you information in regards to how it translates to the classroom, but I'll leave it to my colleagues to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes.
To answer the question, has the process been helpful? I would say absolutely. It has, building on what Mr. Barnes has shared, it has provided the entire organization with clarity around what we prioritize, right? So as the board has said, these are the 3 goals that we want to prioritize. These are the guardrails. Those are the priorities for the board. Those are the priorities for the organization. Those are the priorities for our schools. And so it has provided us with an opportunity to ensure that we have clear alignment from what those priorities are at the board, district level, and school level. I would say I cannot speak to whether or not it has impacted the classroom just yet, because right now, remember, we just rolled out the board goals for this school year. We aligned those board goals to the school improvement planning process. And so right now, those goals are the BLT, it would be the district leadership team, and the building leadership team that are championing those goals and aligning their strategies. But ideally, the more that we focus and align our effort, our energy, our talent on those priorities, it will reach the classroom, right? Because as the schools are going deep into their school improvement plan, they'll be saying, well, what instructional strategies do we need to adapt, adjust, change, modify to reach this goal in response to our data? Well, that magic happens in the classroom. And so we are at the beginning stage of implementing this process across the entire district. And I think that it has certainly provided us with clarity. It has provided us with greater and deeper transparency about what's working and what's not. And certainly it has provided us with alignment. And I would also add that, you know, prior to us transitioning to this governance model, you know, what we discussed at the board table when cabinet members were invited was similar to that of the topic or flavor of the month, right? It was not necessarily discussing student outcomes. And so I think that there's no greater conversation that we could be having at this table to communicate to our community, our staff, and our district about what matters most. It is student outcomes, and we share those values, and we really appreciate the process of being able to look at those goals and then really have a conversation, taking on a learner stance of understanding what are the challenges, where are we meeting the goal, what's going well, and we're modeling the same process that we expect for our school-based teams, right? You're looking at your data, you're measuring it against the goals that you've set, and you're taking that learner stance. No one wants to settle on where we are now. We all want to get better. And I would argue that we're modeling that process for our schools in real time, and they can see what that continuous improvement process looks like at the board table, what it looks like at the district meetings, district leadership team, BLTs, as well as our TBTs. So I think it's a great example of the continuous improvement process that we want to see modeled throughout the entire organization.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman.
So I would say that it's been helpful as well. And for me, I think from a leadership perspective, you know, as a leader, you understand that what gets monitored gets done. And what I would say that the process has done for us organizationally is that your monitoring has helped to focus our monitoring. And so, you know, even the sorts of questions that you asked, and there was a question that Dr. Pierce asked a few sessions ago around co-teaching, like how do you know that co-teaching is working, right? And so just that question, even though we know that there's a research base around co-teaching, but it lets us know that we need to be looking at the data around our co-teaching model. And recently we had a session where we had, where we're starting to scale and elevate pockets of excellence. And so we were looking at a couple of schools where we've had co-teaching going on, and the questions that I'm asking the team is, what is the data for these students, for these special education students that are being mainstream or that are in inclusive settings? Are we seeing results around the impact as opposed to those schools that maybe haven't scaled co-teaching in the same sort of way? So I think that it's been meaningful in that way, and that it is helpful from a leadership perspective to focus the work.
Others on that question? I know some of you kind of touched on the others, but the helpfulness of it.
Well, I might be a little biased. Clearly, I find it to be a helpful process because the very nature of the student outcome-focused governance process fosters a continuous improvement conversation. And it also, you know, from a performance management lens, fosters alignment of effort, alignment of work. And so I see at the cabinet level a lot of cross-departmental collaboration around the work. And I'm not sure that that's always happened. I know in other organizations when continuous improvement isn't the driver, it often doesn't happen. The very conversation that we were having earlier around budget and making holistic decisions about what's best for children, because we all have things that we think are important and are drivers, but ultimately we have to make a weighted decision for that moving forward. But for me, the proof actually came in the voices of our principals last week. So we brought our principals together for a cycle of school improvement planning. And at the end of that, in the feedback, the qualitative feedback we got from them, themes emerged like, oh, we appreciate the alignment. We see the alignment between the board goals, what's in the OIP, and how this training has been set up today. Oh, we appreciate the opportunity for a deep dive into our data and the supports to make use of being able to interpret that data. Oh, we appreciate that other members of the team and their teams were present to talk about that planning and steps forward in an aligned fashion. So while we may not have that voice from our students quite yet, our principals are now carrying that forward in their planning with what they plan to do in their building, which again will carry down through the BLTs and TBTs, and I think we can anticipate to be able to see that in student voice as well. I see it having encouraged, again, collaboration. It encouraged us to dig deeper because we went into our data and then went and did school visits to be able to do range finding, to understand root cause. That to me, I think, is a very different process. That's where we elevated the themes around attendance and school climate. We did that based on what we heard from our principals around the system. So I think it has great value, and I'm looking forward to seeing how, as we move forward, we learn. And it was very, I think, interesting for our principals to hear us when we were out in front of them saying, we are learners. I expect to learn from you as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Klein, did you want to jump in?
Thank you so much, President Adair. The SOFG model allows us to pinpoint our board goals so that we can align everything that we do and provide clarity for all, not just those that are in the central office. That it give us clear alignment without any guesswork. We used to have a lot of guesswork about our board goals because we really didn't have them. I do feel, though, it is too soon to look at affecting the student. And so we have only just begun with this model.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. Mr. DeFabo, did you want to jump in here?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, in many aspects of my work, the board goals and guardrails are infused into what we're doing. And for me, that has a direct input on how some of our labor agreements come out, and obviously a direct input on how people are interacting with students. And so the board goals and guardrails for us help permeate what you're trying to do at this table throughout the organization, which becomes incredibly impactful. So for us, it is delivery of the work that you're trying to get accomplished, and then, as my peers said, it's very important that we're able to have alignment across all of the work that we're trying to do. So especially in the talent space, that we need to make sure we have the right people coming in the door. We need to make sure that we're training our staff up to be what we need to be in order to support our students. So that alignment is great. To hear that our principals are starting to feel it is wonderful. And I think that it grounds us in the work that we're doing every single day, so that we are doing the work that you want us to do, which is incredibly important. And there are definitely times when we're speaking in your voice to other people, which to me means that's when you know it's working, right? When other people are sending the message that you are sending. So for me, it's a real win, and I think it's working well.
Let me ask all of you this. It's not on your paper, so you're going to have to just think on the fly here. So I think, a lot of our interaction in it is with our actual monitoring sessions, when we are asking the questions and, we're learning too as we're doing it. I wonder, from a staff perspective, one, how do you feel about the actual monitoring session? And do you feel that we are being effective and effective for you? And what improvements do you think we could do in the session to effectuate the goals that we all have? And I won't call on all of you. I mean, you might all not have an answer. So if anyone has any part of an answer to any of those, jump in.
By default. I think that as time has gone on, the board has become more effective. It was apparent early on that as you were being trained on the process, that the board was struggling with, well, what questions can I ask? And I think that President Adair, I think you've done a great job in ensuring that everybody stays on topic, because we have 7 board members who all have a common goal but have different ideas on how to get there. And I think the establishment of the goals and the guardrails sort of compels the board to be on the same page to reach that common goal. And it's real difficult to sit back when you have a question to ask or you want to insert your opinion. And it's real hard to not ask a question without inserting your opinion. And I think that's a struggle with everyone. But I think that the way you're doing it, I think you're checking each other, which I think is great. I think it's also a great idea that President Adair, that you're not the only one who's done it, that you've allowed at least one other person to do it. And I think that each board member should have the opportunity to do that, because it's obviously not easy to do. And so I think that you all are doing a great job. I think that all 7 are on the same page. We have a common goal, and that's our students.
Thank you. Anyone else? Who are you pointing at?
It's on now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Dr. Blue? Oh, she just got on. Well, then she doesn't know what the question was. I don't want to put her on the spot.
Yeah, okay.
Someone text her the question.
In the meanwhile, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent for a second. My first career, I was a therapist. And becoming trained as a therapist, I went through a program that focused on cognitive behavior therapy. And many of the people that were in the program were frustrated that that was the model that we were learning. We had to learn it with fidelity. And it felt a little uncomfortable, like a suit that's a little too tight or a little too loose. It took a while. Throughout my career, I was very thankful that I learned a model with fidelity. So I think I've seen an effort here to learn a model with fidelity. In that process, I think we found some places where, in the future we might want to change. But I would encourage for the time being to continue to lean into the model with fidelity and then think about those changes a little bit. Because, as we've all said, we're only about a year in.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to come to the board. I know we want to talk. Let me turn to direct reports and Dr. James. What are your thoughts about the monitoring sessions, as well as just effectiveness and ways the board could improve?
As Mr. Barnes stated, I think initially they were a little rough, but they've gotten better over time. I think they've been a good, efficient use of time. And from those conversations, you have to remember on the business and operations side, it's a little bit more difficult because my curricular friends have been doing this a long time. Getting, the board goals and guardrails translated so support services understand what they are and their role in supporting student achievement is something that we've worked with the talent department on getting some training for our staff. So I think the work is, progressing pretty well just in terms of what the board is laying out and the discussions and I think they're bringing more clarity to the work.
I'll go. The first sessions were challenging to watch, to see board members struggle with how we're supposed to ask a question, wanting to get the information, but because of not being, still learning the process, that was difficult. I do appreciate the transparency and that it demonstrates that you all are a learning board and you're willing to go out there and try something different because you believe that this is going to be beneficial to the students, which is what we all want to do. As everybody else here at the table, I am really, wanting to get that feedback on question number 3, because I think that's out of all the questions, they're all important, but that's the most important one. I know that's going to take us time to get to. So, I appreciate the process, and I know, you're learning, and it's going to have some growing pains, and that's what we're kind of going through right now.
Thank you, Auditor Smith.
I would say I echo all the sentiments. But when I think about when we started in 2019, remember, we didn't have a strategic plan or a governance model, right? So we did a 5-year strategic plan with the community. Then the board went back out to the community and got additional feedback to formulate the goals and guardrails. I mean, to go back to the community again, to ask for what should the board be responsible for was a second effort because we had already engaged the community on what are our hopes and dreams and aspirations for how that they can be responsible. So we went out yet again. I think it shows that the board was serious about changing a culture of how we do our board work and what was important, right? And then we remember the retreat we had with Michael Casserly, right? And, we kind of laugh now, but we had the retreat with Michael Casserly, and that's how we met AJ. We met AJ at Harvard, and we began to talk about how can the board really get some assistance, and the board said yes. Jennifer and all said yes. We wanted the Council of Great City Schools to really help us to really focus our efforts and our attention on student outcomes. So when you look at the courage that the board has taken and saying that we are serious about changing finding a governance model that works for us and our community, changing our behavior so that we are talking about what's important. Yes, it was difficult, those first few meetings as we, even me in my seat, as we kind of think about, man, how do we answer the questions? How do we get to transparency? How do we say openly some of the deficits that we know that we had, some of the strategies that we know we didn't have in place? But it did get us to aligning our work across the district and really changing the culture in that way. Even a question after every monitoring session, you're asking, okay, superintendent, what do you guys need from us? That goes back to that funding question, making sure that things are working, are not underfunded. So I think it's changed the conversation. People know that the board is monitoring these 3 things, and these things that we've all talked about in cabinet meetings, as Dr. Chapman and others talking about. We see the cross-section of the chiefs in their chiefs meetings. They're talking about this. We even in our core team, we've moved from executive team to our core team is creating organizational reliability everywhere. We making sure all the leaders in the organization understand this work. So we know it's not easy, and we haven't gotten to where we know we're going to get, but just still trying. I think about one of the kids from the Columbus Promise. He said, it doesn't hurt to try. It's the promise of a try. We're trying, and I think that's part of it. We're going back again, and we're saying, let's ask that question differently. You know, and I know at times it can be challenging as adults to have somebody kind of, you know, course correct, let's reframe it. But I think that's important because we want to get this right. We want to make sure we're asking the right questions so that we can get the right response. But I also would say that, you know, when you move to a different strategy, know that too, the organization's response to that may not be immediate. So it's sometimes setting up new systems in our organization so that we can get the answers that the board wants, that the community wants. So it's not as easy as saying, okay, go back and get this and we want to report on that next week. They're really, because of lack of some of the systems and organizations throughout various departments, it's really us going back and having other conversations so that we can organize ourselves in a way that from responding from here on out, we're getting those proper responses and getting back to that clear transparency. But this is the real number. This is how we know that this number is what it is, because the system is set up that way that we can get that data easily. But it's been a good process, a learning process. And as someone stated here, people see us learning out loud, which is, you know, we go in classrooms and we're always watching our teachers teach our kids and them learning. Now people get to see us learning and asking very important questions about things that if you go out in a building, you may want to see some of this stuff in practice.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer? Any, yeah,
I want to
anything?
be additive, hopefully, in my comments. When I first saw you implementing the model, the first thing that came to my mind was, thank God we're going to have focus. Because too often in organizations, and especially with the numerous boards that I've worked with, 5 or 7 members, you have 5 or 7 ideas, and you end up getting a lot of, I think we should do this statements. And to manage that is, in a word, impossible. So focus. I was so excited. 3 goals, not 75. 3 of them. And that no matter what came along the way, the bumps in the road, the lack of bus drivers, the lack of this from the state, or those bumps in the road, no matter what, we could come back to focus on 3 goals. And what Talisa just mentioned, data. One of your steps is, did you get the data? And we talked today about connecting dots with the data. If we do this, what do we get? My experience on the private sector was paramount. You know, I was a revenue generator at several organizations, and so it was perfectly clear. What are you going to do? If you do this, are you going to achieve this? And if you don't achieve this, why not? I mean, that felt, it's both comfortable and risky because you run the risk that you fail. But you ask the question, what are we doing to correct our direction? So focus and data, I was and continue to be excited about. Recognizing that that is a struggle after the years I've worked with board members. You know, sometimes I smile because I know that's hard to do. The other thing about focus is, you think about it, these are the things we're supposed to do. This is what we're doing. This is what we want to do. And to me, equally important is we don't do all this other stuff. So you can't, you know, you can't be all things to all people. So as much as it helps us focus where we're going, it helps us say, boy, that sounded like a good idea. It sounds like a good idea. But that doesn't align. It isn't focused here. So we can stop. We're going to go through a process of saying, what can we stop doing? And that's equally important. So this model just institutionalizes that focus. And so that's what I was excited about. Aligning financial resources is easy because you align it to that plan, if that plan is developed with financial resources in mind. Makes my job kind of easy. That's why when I had conversations with AJ, and I'm going, yeah, he goes, you get it. I go, well, yeah, That's easy, but you have to have the plan to align them to. So we can do that. The tough part is that plan to be aligned, to achieve, to actually have that causal relationship. It's one thing to say we're aligned, and it's something else to be aligned. And I think this model helps us be aligned.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I think Dr. Blue would like to say something. I'm sorry, I missed you, Dr. Blue.
No problem. Thank you, President Adair. I obviously echo what's already been said, but I think the only thing I would add is that the more that we go down the line of this process and get better at it, it also helps us inside our departments to do something similar. So I really like the idea that AJ presented around just the cascading effects of this work. And so watching the board be this intentional about the strategies and return on investments of our partnerships, the way that we spend our money, the way that we outline our strategies and how they help to meet our goals, makes it easier for us at the department level to work in a similar fashion in terms of the strategies that we are holding up inside of our departments. I think the other piece is just the clarity that it has helped to provide, because I think there's some moments where there are things that you all may see and say, wow, this is something that we maybe should have looked at instead, but it helps us to ask better questions in the future. It helps us to really get clear on what our root causes might be and what strategies might very specifically address those, instead of saying, well, let's just do this one strategy because it sounds good or it works anecdotally, but now we can see the alignment of the financial resources, the data outcomes, and we're able to say, okay, well, now let's tweak in this sort of way. So I have enjoyed watching this process emerge, and I think as we go and you all get even more refined, our process at the cabinet level will also fall in line with that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Blue, and thank you all for your comments. Thank you all, board members, for allowing the time for the team to give us that feedback. I am going to now open it up to us to discuss. And for us, I would like to focus on not only what the feedback was, but the actual monitoring session itself. And I think that, it's important to just say that we are all, I know, coming at this differently. Some of us have had different training, more intense training. Some of us are actual coaches, and right now this is just an open place. From here, what my hope is that listening to the team and then listening to all of us, we'll be able to, either do this have a small group or do it during a retreat, but then really talk about, as we go forward, especially with the monitoring, what changes, if necessary, do we need to make it most efficient and effective for Columbus? And so as we're having that discussion, we're not going to decide that right now. This is just more an opportunity for board members, just like our team did, to share your thoughts, share your perspective, share where you think we can improve so that we can continue the conversation and decide if there's anything that we think we could do to make it more efficient and effective. So with that, I will open the floor to board members. We'll start with Board Member Brown.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for first not cutting me off and allowing me to speak these questions at the last meeting. I want to make sure you all understand these were off the top of my head. I jotted them down like
they were so good that I.
And we may need to refine them a little bit as we go forward. But I'd like to see us periodically get back to these. I don't know what the right time frame is, but get back to these. And in the near future, I hope that we get into number 3 a bit more. I think everybody agrees with that. What I was thinking when I first talked about this, and I'm one of those, probably more than anybody else on the board, that struggles with much of this, and that it's a lot of work. And I was thinking, gosh, is the juice worth the squeeze? And, you know, it does take some effort to do this, and some effort to change. And I just, you know, in my own mind, wanted to make sure. I think that another factor that is important, and I was really encouraged by what I heard, strongly encouraged. And by hearing from all of you about ways in which this makes sense for you in doing your jobs and what you see of others that are on your teams with their jobs and the focus and the goals and guardrails and how it all fits together to help with alignment. It makes sense, and it encourages me to try to work more at those things that I struggle with, which is, you know, what's a proper question? Yeah, I'm used to asking questions. I used to do that a lot from the bench, but you know, this is different, much different framework. I'm also hopeful that as we go forward with this, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way because it's not intended in that way, but I recognize that in this public setting with the board, that having complete honesty is a challenge for all of you. I recognize that. I'm not suggesting that anybody's not, but there are challenges there. And as we get more comfortable with this, as we go forward, I'm hopeful that more of that will also come out because it's not perfect. And that we can, you know, have real honest discussions about what's working and what's not. Aside from that, you know, I'm glad we did this, and I hope that we'll do it again from time to time.
Thank you, Board Member Brown. We'll go Dr. Pierce.
Yeah, I have something to say too. I can go first.
You're the expert.
Okay, Board Member Beckerly, then Dr. Pierce.
I as the coach in training, not a coach yet, I think that we, at the outset, could have and should have done a better job of explaining the purpose of the structure of the questions. And I think it might provide clarity for everyone, including the recipients of the questions as well as the askers of the questions. And the purpose of this incredibly structured questioning process is that these monitoring sessions are, there are multiple levels of things happening in them. And one of them is our job as board members is to have as clear, to make sure we have as clear as possible a role of what is happening with our students at that moment in time. We're supposed to get a really clear snapshot, good, bad, or indifferent. What is their status? And the way we get that is by asking questions that are targeted at getting that and aren't going to get us distracted by embedded opinions or embedded advice. And you saw me struggle, so I am not suggesting this is easy. I've gotten slapped down by President Adair on multiple occasions, and Board Member Cole on at least one or two. So it's not easy, because part of your instinct when you're asking a question is to explain where you're coming from to improve. Like, good communication usually warrants you saying, well, this is what I'm thinking, and what do you think, right? But in this context, that threatens to change the answer. Because if we're signaling our opinion or we're telling them what our advice is, we're going to get in the way of getting that clarity about what is happening and what's going on. And so we have this focus where, and it's way more important for us to understand what is going on rather than to spend, well, how are you going to fix it, how are you going to fix it, how are you going to fix it, because part of what's happening, and so that's why there's that 2/3, 1/3 allocation. if we don't spend enough time figuring out for sure that, or getting the clearest picture possible, we can't make our evaluation through the how questions of whether the next, assuming that we're not on target, whether the next strategy is reasonably aligned to getting us back on track. Because what we're doing in that moment, when we decide whether to vote to accept the report or not accept the report, is basically, and we can't decide whether it's our favorite strategy. We just have to decide that whatever the superintendent and her team are suggesting is reasonably aligned to get us there. And that, because we can't substitute our opinions for their expertise. But if it sounds, if it's off base, or if we've got 3 reports in a row where we're not on target and they're saying stay the course, we might make a decision as a board that that is not reasonably aligned to closing the gap, at which point we don't accept the report. And by not accepting the report, we're basically providing an interim evaluation of the superintendent and her team. And if we accept the report, the reverse is true, which we're providing an interim evaluation that we think that the superintendent and her team are doing just fine. And part of that feeds into the evaluation at the end. And so the discipline, and there may be, you know, it's funny because AJ's listening, and he and I have gone back and forth about revising the instructions to try to provide more clarity about what we're doing this for. So, and to the extent that there are topics that are absolutely pertinent, you know, Dr. Pierce, I know transportation and attendance are clearly aligned. And we should be having the transportation discussion. It's just that we don't want to embed that in this discussion because it gets in the way of our seeing the clarity. And I just think that that was worth staking out for everyone because it's not as clear as it should be, and it might have gotten lost in the, you know, translation when we started down this process 2 years ago.
Thank you. Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much. Board Member Beckerly, I appreciate that you went back to that session to bring up that transportation was brought up by me in our previous monitoring session. And that gets to the real point and core of my critique of this model. We have failed to be adaptable and flexible to anticipate and respond to issues that are present within our district, transportation being one of those. We have been so focused on making sure that we discuss a particular type of question, the what, the why, the who, for 40 minutes, or the how for 25 minutes, that we failed to see. We have a 73-year-old grandma standing outside waiting for her grandchildren to come home in the dark. Let me say that one more time. We have been so focused on exactly what this model says we need to do related to a monitoring report for 3 goals and guardrails that we are missing the very real issues that our community is facing. So we failed to be adaptable and to be flexible. And that's the issue that I have with it. Our monitoring reports do give us a snapshot. But what's the consequence when the goal isn't met? What's the consequence? We don't accept the report. How many reports do we not accept before we take action and responsibility and accountability to get the right people in the classroom to help our students learn? Now, we've said question number 3 is important, but we have no data to tell us what it's doing right now. What impact is this model having on our students right now? I beg to differ. I think we get data every time we have a meeting. Every time we have parents, students, teachers sit in here and tell us we are missing an issue and our kids are being affected by it. We're getting that data. Has this been nice? I appreciate you all sitting around this table and sharing your reflections and thoughts on it. But I agree with my colleague, Board Member Brown, that this isn't the honest venue or format to have this conversation. I wouldn't expect you to say anything other than this model is good and that it's helping. I wouldn't expect you to say that you're working 16 and 18-hour days, that you're missing time with your families, that you're running around trying to figure out how to make this model work and happen. Because that's what you're doing. Dr. Dixon, Dr. James, you said your job is to make the transportation happen. And I know that requires long hours. But when you come to the board table and we can't have an honest conversation about transportation, and that's the issue that's keeping you up and away from your family, that's a problem. So I thank you for that. I also feel that this forum and format is leaving out critical voices, principals, teachers, instructional assistants, bus drivers. It's fine and dandy for us who have made the decision from a position of power that this is the model we're embracing to sit here and then evaluate how it's affecting us, how we're doing with it. Let's ask the boots on the ground. How is this model affecting you if we can't talk about transportation and, need I bring it up, Mifflin can't get their kids to school? How do we think those principals are going to say this model is affecting them? How do we think the instructional assistants and the teachers, our special education teachers who need help with students in the classroom and want to implement the co-teaching, but continually have to hear from our HR department, we are trying, but we can't get people. And that discussion only happens when a monitoring session happens? We are missing the issues that are affecting our community. So I do have an issue with this model because we're not showing adaptability and flexibility. So what does it matter if we sit around this table and say, it's a great model, but we missed the mark and our kids aren't being successful? And they're going out into the workforce and can't read or can't do math or have had such a horrible experience that they're dropping out of school at the 8th, 9th grade, that they're wandering and walking around and getting into issues that they shouldn't be into. Each time we have a kid in this community die to gun violence, I say, where's that monitoring report? Because we've missed it. We are so focused on what AJ says and how this model needs to be implemented that we have a fire burning in our district and we ain't thinking about putting it out. So thank you so much for allowing me to make my remarks and comments. I do hope as a district, as a board, we will put aside these opportunities to give political speeches or positioning of one another and really put our kids at the center. And sometimes that means going off schedule and dealing with the issues that are impacting them in the classroom.
Okay. Thank you for those thoughts and opinions and feelings, Dr. Pierce. We'll go with Vice President Reyes.
So I will have to agree in a different way, in a different manner, and I've voiced this to you, Jennifer, and to AJ. I also feel like it's a little linear for me. It is frustrating that it's taking such a long time. I don't believe it's a bad model, so let me just start there. I do not believe it's a bad model. So I already had these notes on before Dr. Pierce has talked. As we're learning, you know, to your point, Board Member Beckerly's like, you know, there was a lot of definitions that weren't provided to us at the very beginning. We're kind of learning, and I do feel very closed off in the questioning. I've told you that. You know, it's like, how do we figure out what is the data that we need if we're not having the conversation? I think at some point we needed to start here and then start focusing linear. But if we don't we don't have those conversations, and it's hard, because there's, I mean, we'd have to have like 100 meetings to go very quickly. I think that's the hard part when our district is going 1,000 miles an hour, but we're learning at 10 miles an hour. Not because we're not trying to do a good job, or not because it's not a good model, and it's not because all those other things, but it has been frustrating to me. And I've talked to you, and I've talked to Dr. Dixon and to AJ, right, that I feel like there's a lot of things that we need, that are going on in the district, that we need to figure out where that fits, where that goes. Yes, you cannot look at 50,000 things, but unfortunately, this district has 50,000 things. We still need to have our goals, we still need to have our guardrails, but we also need to be focused on, because we have the biggest ship in the sea. So how do we make sure that, like I always say, what am I missing if I don't ask the question? What am I missing if I don't ask the question I really want to say, because I'm trying to stay within the do and the why and the what data am I not getting because I'm restricted to 4 questions? Because that's how I feel like if I don't know how to ask it, then I'm just not going to get the data, and then we're going to just go on. And I'm trying to figure out. I have not gone through the training of the SOFG, so there's probably more to it. You know, and similar to Dr. Pierce, I wrote right here is, can our students wait while we learn? Right? So that's the part that I keep struggling with. You know, just, you know, I keep on going, it's like back to those monitoring reports that I've talked to long time ago. It's like, can we have a model where there's a lot of important things, and we have to address them. Some may have to fall outside while we're learning these goals and guardrails and being linear and aligned and getting all those ducks in the road. There's still stuff that we need to put into our calendar, into the way that we do business, so that we know that things are running. So that's the part that I get kind of, when you talk about what's keeping you up at night. It's like those things. You know, when I don't say, hey, we do X, Y, Z, if I say, what, you know, why are we doing X, Y, Z, then it comes out as I'm steering you in a certain direction, but then I'm not learning, you're not learning, because if I'm not telling you what I'm looking for, or what I feel is missing, or what we're hearing in the community, then we can't drive the way that we want to see the report or the data that we would like to see. So sometimes I feel like we go through the report and it's unfinished. And then we just move on to the next report. And I know it's a process, because, you know, I've heard from prior boards when they went into the prior model, where they would do the goal. It was the superintendent interpretation, the board interpretation. I mentioned that a couple of meetings ago, where it's like, when does the board interpretation piece happen? And then we get the result at the end. So there's actual dialogue. I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I don't feel like there's actual dialogue. I ask you 3 or 4 questions, and then you kind of spit some numbers back at me, or and then I'm like, okay, and then we just kind of move on. So that's for me. Again, I don't have a lot of issues with the model. I think eventually we'll get there. I just wish we could go a little faster. And then I just fear that we can't wait and there's data missing.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, Ms. Vera, any comments?
Are we going in order?
Well, I'm just before, others want to do a second round, and I just want to give everyone a first opportunity first.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's insight and feedback. I honestly and earnestly do. Let me share why this is such a tremendous opportunity and tremendous challenge all at the same time. The first part is that this model works on several levels, and the first of them are very, very intimate. So when you talk about this concern about honesty and conversation, for example, and it's a real one, it is very honest. It is very difficult to have a conversation in an intimate environment with people you don't know, and God forbid, in a public environment with people you do know and there's many you don't, to have intimate dialogue about things like common pretending. Common pretending in jest is the idea that you are compromising your own personal values because you chose to behave a certain way that gave you an inherent benefit. An inherent benefit of feeling like you were being heard, an inherent benefit of feeling as though you were speaking and representing a constituency. But the common pretending of it is that you threw yourself off track and you threw the board off track in the work and the process. So many of us take on the idea that behind our shirts, behind these jackets, we have Superman shirts. And every time a child gets killed, every time something happens in the community and the news reports that it was one of our children that got hurt or victimized somebody else, we want to put on the Superman shirt. We want to go out with a cape and jump out the window and save the day, when that's really not our work. And I don't mean to sound insensitive. I don't. Because when we really acknowledge that about ourselves, who understands therapy, when you really acknowledge that about yourself, you take the first step towards confronting your own obstacle to your work. You actually do. You actually help slow that process down and steady your mind. Give yourself a level set and a sense of peace about what you actually have to make decisions around. And it's not easy. It is not. It is not intended to be. So I promise you, I don't say this as any kind of dig or insult. It is not, because I've actually done this work, and it is tremendously difficult. The 2 days before our actual convention started, I was just spent. I was literally spent, because you have to take all of these things in consideration. The work we had to do in preparation requires us to do different things where we have to give out a penny for every misbehavior. Everything that takes us off track, we have to give a penny to somebody in acknowledgement of that and explain it. So again, getting back to the first part of this that I think would really help put this work in much greater context is the idea of going through that intimate exercise of what is it that we're doing behaviorally that takes us off track, that compromises our behavior. But we chose to do that because we got some sort of benefit from it. We don't have those real conversations. And that's difficult to have in public when someone says, how were you commonly pretending when you said or when you did so-and-so? Where were you in your headspace at that moment? And we'll more often find that we were trying to benefit something, but at the same time feeling justified in addressing something too. Here's the other piece, preparation. Preparation. The work that we do in this space requires us to be prepared. A great deal of that work is done before the discussion even happens. It's one of those annoying things. This is sometimes where I've fallen short, but it's one of those opportunities that we take to ask the question, to frame it how we want to frame it, to have previous conversation with those stakeholders involved in answering those questions, to say, this is where I'm coming from, this is what I mean, this is what it means in context. I think when you do that, that makes this public presentation aspect of it, this public dialogue, right, this public dyadic communication, I think it makes it happen a lot easier. It really does. We just got to do the preparation work. All of us have tremendous things outside of this work that we're also carrying and doing all of that. And sometimes that poses as a challenge. It does, quite realistically. But if you do that prep work in advance, you stay in touch and communication with those stakeholders who have position and opportunity to answer your question, I think it makes that piece better. Structure. The questions that we have to answer during the dialogue itself provide the necessary structure to keep us on point. Again, it does not negate in any way, shape, form, or fashion previous to or at another time bringing up the certain things that we're concerned about. It does not. It does not take that off the table. What it does is during a monitoring discussion, give us a very structured and organized means by which to convene that conversation that is also time-bound as well, okay? And then the last piece I'll say is theory of action, right? We all know, and we've talked about this during our monitoring conversations about what are the remediating steps that we're going to take to ensure success. Again, this is an opportunity for us to talk about what are next steps, how you gonna level up. These are part of those questions. They are. Theory of action gives us that opportunity to have it in a very structured kind of way that is to make sense for us as the board and for y'all in terms of how you actually not only identify it, delegate it, and execute it. You all said that earlier on in your conversation. So again, there's internal work that has to be done, and that's serious work. I'd say, quite honestly, that's the first at least 40% of how we would be successful at this model. And at any model, quite honestly, I've never confronted something that actually challenged us to look at ourselves individually, put that mirror up, and see what's in front of it. Look at your character and your caricature all at the same time. Consider your, I don't hear no I don't hear no yummy sounds out in the audience, because this is what this work is really about. What is our character and our caricature in this work? Next step is, again, the preparation, then the structure, and then what are our next steps and how do we do them together? I promise you, I don't mean at all in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I don't think I have been, dismissive or disrespectful or anything like that. I just think that if there's a spot that we've missed, that's a sweet spot for us to understand this better, it's definitely that intimate work. I agree with some of the things that was said about inclusiveness of voices. I do want to hear from my principals. I want to hear from our regional soups. I felt like they should be at the table too. I feel as though they should be the one. They're the ones who are talking to principals every day. They're the ones who are in the buildings also every day. I love to hear from them, you understand? So I totally agree with some of the aspects of where things can be captured and integrated into how we have these discussions. But at the end of the day, I think that this is a model that works. I'd love to see us a little more invested in it. I love for AJ and some of his team, and I'm a coach, I'm a training coach, and working with other school districts around the country with this. I see us having the opportunity here to become a little more engaged in that internal part and then understanding with clarity how to take those next steps. I thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Board Member Cole. Board Member Vera.
Well, I first want to thank everyone for this conversation, because I know it's not easy. And I think I came in at the tail beginning of the new year, obviously. And so what I have learned being a part of this SOFG training cohort as a new board member is these are the goals and the guardrails we as a board, prior to me getting here, said we care about, right? And so I appreciate the framework that comes along with this model, but I believe we have to make this framework work for us. And one of the things that I've learned in the opportunities to learn aside other large urban districts who are implementing this model is we have to look at the meat of it and really spit out what doesn't apply to the city of Columbus, Columbus City Schools. And what I would like to see us do is really spend some time, and I mentioned this to President Adair, talking to some of the other districts that are in year 2, 3 of this process, because having spoken with some of those people a few weeks ago, it was very eye-opening for me because it was never presented to me that it could be a this or that, that we didn't have flexibility within the framework for it to make sense for, okay, how does this trickle down on the building level? How does it trickle down in our superintendent's office, in our treasurer's office? And so I agree with my colleagues' sentiments that we have a lot of work to do, but we have to simultaneously figure out the implementation speed model, but we still have to get the day-to-day done. And so I do find that sometimes the monitoring sessions pull us apart. And we cannot afford to fall apart. We have work to do. That's why we are here. And if we are fighting each other over decimals, important things, and I'm not saying that these reports are not important, but if we can't get to the root cause, if we can't get to the meat of why we're really here, which I feel like almost every week now, then we're not doing a service to our kids at the end of the day. And so what I want to remind us, we are not in battle of each other. We're not in battle of our cabinet members and all our different departments. And I think that this model, although I don't agree with every single element of the implementation work, I think it does push us to start putting the ego to the side and saying, what are the core facts here? And what do we need in order to make this happen for our kids? And so what I don't want to see happen is that we spend so much time arguing as to the effectiveness and really spend more time. We have to intentionally spend time together to figure out what is the strategy. Because I got here and we were already going, and I don't know that we had a direction as to how fast should we be going, what exactly does this look like, how often are we meeting with these coaches from the governing model. None of that has really happened. So we're kind of running as we go, and we're picking up groceries, and we're just doing stuff. And as to my colleagues' sentiments, we have things that are happening that are important in our district right now. And for the community to see some of these sessions, they're like, what are y'all talking about? And so taking the time to not only understand it, create the framework that fits us, we have to educate our community in the process. And so I appreciate the focus of the goals and the guardrails. And this is something that I think we as a board, if we're saying, if we're moving in so many different directions, do we need to be evaluating what we said was the priority? Because that is also something that, you know, I'm hearing a lot of more consistent things, not saying we're going to make that decision right here, right now, but what is our timeline for when do we go back and evaluate, is this still the goals and the guardrails? Does our cabinet feel these should be the goals and the guardrails for the next however many years? So we also have to give ourselves grace in saying, okay, we're learning, we're going to do it with fidelity and truly do it with fidelity, but also understanding that one size does not fit all. We are a different district, we have different situational needs, and we have to have the flexibility to make decisions that impact our students' lives today and not waiting for the next monitoring session or the next opportunity just to have dialogue. This is what we're here for, and we have to continue to lead in that space and not get distracted by all of the other moving pieces. We have to do both at the same time.
Thank you, board members, for those comments. You know, I think I'm right in the middle of all of you. I really believe that the model and what the team is talking about, the operational effectiveness of the model to shift the thinking of the organization is powerful. And I do think that's evident. I believe that they are telling us the truth and not feeding us. I think they believe it, and they're seeing it start to work. And we are a giant organization with a lot of parts, and it's really important that we have a model that can tie everything together in this holistic manner and then tie it back with data to make sure that we know we're improving. I do get frustrated as well with the monitoring sessions because I get to be the referee. And, you know, I'm doing what's on the paper, and I get that the questions are annoying, and I get you're annoyed with me by telling you the question is wrong. But this is the model that we have agreed upon. And so I think that, you know, Board Member Beckerly kind of coming back and re-explaining again what is the point of the monitoring session and the manner in which we set up the questions is really helpful. And again, we didn't really focus on it, and we didn't really get the support. And I agree sometimes, with what Vice President Reyes says, sometimes even after the monitoring session, and it might be because I'm focused on kind of being the referee, I'm like, did we actually accomplish something after this? Like, you guys have done the report, and we have things, especially if we're on track. Like, that one is the hardest for me because there's not those extra things that you're telling us. Like, what's the next step? It's just like, we're on track. It's like, okay, then what am I supposed to ask you? To Board Member Cole's point about the prep, I'll take that on myself too. I haven't always done my homework. We got to do our homework. And part of it is going through, it's asking the questions, it's learning, it's doing the technical, tactical work before you come to the table to understand. And then it's about asking the strategic questions when you get here. Other things that are not part of the monitoring report are important. We have said that those things that we have decided are the key pieces, the priorities that we're going to focus on. What we say changes the behavior of everybody else in the district. So it's really important that it stays consistent. Now, we have learned a lot, and the team knows, because every time we start to ask questions, and even in those pre-questions, we are asking equity questions, because actually that's really what we want, but that isn't what we did, because we didn't know. And so the model does, I feel like, to Dr. Pierce's point, needs to be adaptable to the growth that we are learning in the process to be able to make shifts a little bit sooner before we just etch something in stone for the next 5 years, even though we're learning. So there's a point about learning how to do it with fidelity, but then making sure the metrics are actually going to move us forward. And I know that that is a struggle internally, and I think it is something that we need to kind of think about and consider. Now, just look, having other discussions, we have discussions all the time about all of the critical things that were brought up today. At least I do. That's what I view as part of my job as a board member. I call these people. I talk to them, have discussions about what are we doing, and if anyone wants to have something on the agenda, all you have to do is ask. Right. And we can have a discussion just like we did tonight. And so that's the process. And so if there are important things that we want to discuss as a board, important action items, I mean, they can come into committee, they can come up. There is a process to do those things. And we have talked a lot about ensuring our kids even in our goals and guardrails around social, emotional, Maslow's hierarchy, we know these things are incredibly important. But we are also not the sole decision maker or fixer of a lot of what's going on in our community. And so then we do have to kind of weigh, is that a discussion we have at the table and take the time, and maybe it is, or do we talk about things we can control and we actually directly impact that we have the responsibility for, like making sure our kids can read at 3rd grade? So it is a lot that we have to weigh, and that's been my struggle too, about that weighing, and I've said that to AJ, especially when you look at the rubric about the scoring and what counts and what doesn't count in terms of the model, because we know that some of that is very foundational and we do need to talk about it. So, I mean, I see it as a valuable organizational tool. I think the monitoring sessions themselves, we can do better at fitting our needs, and maybe we need to figure out what that looks like. Because I hear a lot of frustration, I get a lot of frustration when we're in the sessions, and then that's not productive. But, I'll take it on myself. I'm making the commitment to do my homework, because that is going to make me better at, being prepared to ask the right kinds of questions, to better understand the technical and tactical aspects of what the team is doing, and to do a better evaluation. But I think, we all are a little frustrated in the process, and that's okay. And that's what this space is about, because we are learning out loud. And it's not perfect. And it's not perfect for Columbus, and so I think we can make adjustments. But what I'm hearing from the team is that it is something that, one, they see as working as an organizational tool to align, and they see that it is having a cascading effect already down into our buildings. And we have seen some growth, just in the way that we're looking at data and accountability and transparency. And to Dr. Dixon's point, we are finding the gaps that we didn't know or maybe were hidden because people were in a culture of thinking that they couldn't say. And so, we're doing a lot. I do believe that the model is good. I do think that we just have more to work on and more to talk about to figure out what makes it ours. Now, it is 8:30. And board members, we do have a long executive session. So this is just the start of the conversation. And I know I kind of said I'd loop back around, but I'm not going to do that. I am going to invite AJ, though, because AJ is here, to go ahead and give us any comments he would like before we end this discussion. Hi, AJ.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am having an amazing evening in that I'm actually logged in. I have 3 different screens. I have 3 different districts up right now. All 3 of them are either in the middle of or have just completed, engaged with monitoring progress toward one of their goals. And so watching school districts across the country actually spend time evaluating, are our children learning? What strategies are we engaged in? What have worked? What haven't worked? Is just incredibly gratifying. And to see you all continue to do that work, which is a work that's a struggle. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And so to watch you all kind of continue to persist and try to have conversations around how are our students doing is a joy to watch. 3 reflections that are all just reiterating themes that you've already described. First and foremost, the children of Columbus are not yet receiving the education they deserve. There has to be improvement that is faster. There has to be a continuous improvement process to get them more of the education they deserve. And whether that happens or not is your responsibility as 7 board members. It falls directly on your shoulders. That's what you signed up for when you asked the voters to put you in the seats that you sit in. So whether children are failing or succeeding, it's on you. Your response has to be, what are we going to do to cause the type of continuous improvement in the classroom that's going to result in children getting the education that they deserve? And the answer that has been offered to you has been that you have to be involved in continuous improvement process in the boardroom, and that you have to push for the superintendent and then be causing a continuous improvement process among the cabinet, and the cabinet has to push that among the principals, and the principals among the teachers, and the teachers among the students. You are creating culture. You heard the very first inklings of that culture creation from your cabinet this evening when you asked them the questions that you all asked them. And I take them at face value. I don't believe that they're lying to you. I don't believe they're trying to deceive you. I believe that you ask them a question and they answer the question, that they are using the work that you have given them to try to drive an additional measure of focus on whether or not children are actually learning, and trying to figure out how do we push these continuous improvement cycles to focus on that. That's the number one most important thing, is that if you aren't causing continuous improvement in the classroom, then everything else you're doing doesn't matter. And what you're trying to wrestle with tonight is, does monitoring work? Does us engaging in continuous improvement practices in the boardroom eventually make its way down to the classroom? What you heard from your administration is they're in the very infancy of that. And as you all persist, then that will continue to grow. If you all begin to shift gears, then what you should expect is that what alignment that you have begun to inspire will be dismantled. You'll be starting all over again, and your children will suffer your lack of focus. So that's step one, is why do we do this? We do this because we've got to generate continuous improvement for students. Step two, Christina actually said it best, is that we've got to understand root causes. She's absolutely correct on that, that if your monitoring work is not revealing for you root causes, then we've got to upgrade the quality of your monitoring work. That point cannot be overstated. And so anything that we need to do, whatever adjustments, whatever modifications have to be made, whatever personalizations to make this your own, that better gets at the root causes behind what's working and what's not working. Let's go all in on making those adjustments, making those changes. This work is flexible enough to be responsive to that specific inquiry, because that is center field around how do we know what's working and not working for our children, and how do we know how to best be responsive to that as a board, but then also as administration. And so I just wanted to highlight that comment that she made, that this absolutely, that if you're monitoring, if you leave a monitoring conversation and you walk away from the table not having clarity around root causes and around the key strategies that have worked and haven't worked and that are being deployed, and that what sacrifices, what changes you as a board member are going to have to make in order to support those pivots. If you walk away from the monitoring table without that, you have failed to monitor effectively. Whatever changes or adaptations we have to make to get you all there, just know that I'm committed to working with you to making those changes and those adaptations. That's item number 2. And then finally, item number 3. It is absolutely inappropriate as a board to not do the work and then blame the model. You have to do the work. I have repeatedly invited you, and I continue to reiterate that invitation this evening. To the extent that you want this work to be most effective, you actually have to work it. You have to do your homework. And so in the same way that if your high schoolers don't do their homework and then they flunk the quiz on Monday, they don't get to go blame, the textbook. They simply chose not to do the work. This is a position that you all don't want to find yourselves in. And so to the extent that you want to do the homework, there are 2 things. I've offered these before. I'll offer them again. I want to extend gratitude to the board members among you who've taken me up on this offer previously. And I want to encourage the board members who haven't, that this is your opportunity to lean in and do the work. There are 2 different invitations that I've made before I want to make again tonight. One invitation to get stronger at monitoring is to replay the video, to watch previous monitoring sessions that you and I can sit down and do together. And as we watch the video, we can figure out, where did we really get to the sense of root cause? Where did we really get a strong understanding of what is happening for our children and how we can have an impact on it? And where did we miss the mark on that? And as you replay the video, you just get stronger and stronger at it. The other homework opportunity is, before the monitoring sessions, shoot me an email with all the questions that you're going to ask, and we can go through those and figure out how to make sure that you're best positioned to get the answers that you need to get, because that's really important. If you're asking questions and walking away without clarity around what's actually happening for children in that particular domain, like, that's not okay. Like, as a board member, you deserve that information, but the quality of your questions plays a significant role in whether or not you'll get access to that. And so that's the second piece of homework to do, is reach out and say, here are all the questions I'm thinking about asking. Can we go over these together? If you hit me with those several days in advance, the earlier, the better. Then we can schedule time for the 2 of us to go over that, to give you a better chance at actually getting the type of information and the type of understanding you want. As Michael said, monitoring sessions are not designed to talk about everything under the sun. They're always going to be uncomfortable because you are used to being undisciplined, and they are challenging you to be narrowly disciplined and focused on a very, very narrow topic. That is uncomfortable, and that's normal for that to be uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean that you have to be disciplined on just that topic every single day. When you're not monitoring, there are other opportunities to have other conversations, but monitoring requires discipline. And the more that you do that homework in advance and getting clarity about those questions, I'll work with you on that, the stronger the monitoring session will be. And I think you'll find that it'll also be more comfortable, and that you'll get a sense of, how do I weave in other parts of what is going on in our school system? How do I do that effectively? How do I do that appropriately within the monitoring context? And you'll get an idea of, for things that don't fit into the monitoring context, what are other strategies that I can use to bring these up and really surface these issues? All of that is stuff that we can go over together one-on-one that'll have you be fully prepared. So these are the 2 invitations. Reach out to me and I'll sit down and go over previous monitoring sessions with you. or reach out to me and I'll go over future questions with you to make sure that you're prepared to get the information that you deserve and that you need to serve your children. That's item number 3. Again, I'm excited about the work that you've done, excited about what you heard from your administration this evening about how they're changing their adult behaviors to better align with the goals that you have told them reflect the vision of this community. I look forward to being of service.
Thank you, AJ, and we are definitely going to take you up on that service. And so we are going to continue these conversations. I think, board members, let's go back and reflect. And I didn't really hear, and I didn't do it either, but what are some ways that we can improve? Some things that would make it better to get to the root cause. Some of the things that we can start to then hone in on to make this our model, make our monitoring sessions feel more comfortable, a better space, so that we can really get to the heart of what it is, that we have as our goals and guardrails. So if you will all think about that and send them to me, I will put them together, and then we'll figure out next steps about if we do this during a retreat, or maybe we have a few of us work on it and then give some recommendations. We can discuss that format, but let's take some time to do that individual work and get that back to me. So I appreciate everyone. That was a long conversation. I think it was well worth it to kind of also just level set to hear where people were. I think is beneficial. So thank you all. Our next item is 7.4, and that's a discussion on board engagement. This one we are just keeping on our agenda to make sure that we are keeping updates on it. So I'm going to ask, I think Dr. Pierce was working on some things, as well as, I don't think we've done it. Okay, so Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much. So we sent out that doodle poll that gave multiple dates and times in October, and for most of the dates, there were 2 board members that could make those dates. There were 4 of 7 board members that filled out the poll, so we thank those individuals in advance. At this point, we do need to resend that doodle poll out again with dates for probably December, if not January, February. Again, as we get that email, please respond. Open up the link. Misty sent out several reminders for people to fill that doodle poll out. Once we get some good participation for particular dates and times, we can move forward to schedule those opportunities to engage with the community.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Board Member Beckerly.
Is there any way we could, did you have any responses where, 2 people could go and we could just, even with the less than full answers, we could?
You want to go with 2? We can go with 2.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah, I can send you those dates. So we do have identified dates where there are currently 1, 2, 3 dates. So yes, I can send you those dates.
You can go back into the doodle poll.
Oh, I can look, yeah, but I just.
It gives you the dates.
It's not closed.
It's open. It gives you the dates that are most popular.
No, I just was wondering if we could do it that way instead.
Yeah, I think that would be great to have 2 instead of 3. I mean, the point is, and this is what AJ communicated, is it cannot just be one board member, right? It has to be us as a board engaging with the community, again, reiterating the work that we're doing, the ways that we intend to improve. So we want to make sure that there's at least 2 board members there. So I'd be open.
Board Member Vera? Okay, sorry.
I'm trying to keep, we had this idea of pop-ups, and Misty, if you could keep your eye out for other opportunities where there's a big enough gathering that it makes sense to do a pop-up. I mean, there's the string things coming up.
The String Festival
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
is a pop-up potential.
No, thank you, Dr. Pierce, for your work in trying to get us coordinated, because I mean, this is a priority area for all of us in terms of being able to have opportunities to engage without necessarily restriction with our community. And so I was just wondering if we've given any thought or kind of what the planning process will look like as to how we want to engage. So we'll sign up as possible doubles or, but have we given thought or is that kind of phase 2 as to how do we want to go about, we'll have the pop-up opportunities, but is it the idea that we'll go to different regions, or are we going to be going to schools, or essentially when do we kind of create those pieces as to how we are going to go about the engagement?
So I think we really need to develop those pieces once you identify the people that are engaging and participating. So for example, if there's individuals that are, I'll use myself as an example. If I'm on campus and I'm at work and I take my lunch hour, then it might be easier for me to make it over to downtown Columbus or over to Lyndon McKinley or over to Cos during that lunchtime to be able to have that meeting, right? And that's a school environment. It might be easier for me to make it over to Upper Cup, where Dr. Dixon has gone to have various sessions. And so I think we have to be flexible in that time for the individuals that sign up for that slot. Now, what I will say in terms of the format is when board members Beckerly and Reyes and I met, we talked about the format that we would propose, and that format was to stick to the questions that we had got from AJ in our initial community engagement. What are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? What do we need to stop doing? Those three basic questions. I think us engaging with the community in that way will give us some very valuable information that I think will be able to inform the work that we do outside of inform the work that we do. I'll leave it at that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Let's move to item 8.1. This is notice of public hearing on reemployment of retired employee Melva Clark. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 33.09.345, the Columbus Board of Education gives notice that Melva Clark, teacher who retired from the Columbus City Schools effective May 29th, 2015, is seeking employment with the Columbus City Schools as a special education teacher effective January 4th, 2023. The board will hold a public hearing on January 3rd, 2023 at 5:30 in the boardroom at 3700 South High, Columbus, Ohio, on the issue of Ms. Clark's reemployment. All right, item 9, moving to our consent agenda. This evening, our consent agenda consists of item 10.1 to 25.3. Are there any items a board member would like to remove for separate consideration? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Are there any items board member would like to discuss? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Sure.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. Ms. Nichols, are you online? I didn't know if our caller.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, did we try to call her back?
I'm doing it right now.
Board members, as she is seeing if our caller is available, I anticipate our motion will pass for executive session, so after that, we will take a short break before heading into the room.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes to address the board, Ms. Jefferson. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you, and good evening, Superintendent, board officers, and members of the board. I live in the Columbus City School District, alumni of the district, class of 96. I'm actually before you this evening with just, again, some ongoing transportation concerns. In the past, I was able to establish open lines of communication with both the former transportation directors, it was Stephen and Rob, to whom have both left the district within the past 2 school years. Just having some conversations with the rep at the department, I became knowledgeable and also was understanding that, there was a new system that was put in place in April, which is the end of the school year. with leaving some inevitable learning curve with the reps working this school year with the system, in which I've learned that it's actually creating more steps and processes instead of this being seen as a process improvement. Along with the 45-minute to hour wait times in which I've had screenshots and I've can log, but for the sake of time, I would spare you the breakdown, but definitely will be willing to provide if there's any interest on follow-up. I'm mindful that contract negotiations were taking place at the beginning of the school year. However, it's concerning to me to learn that route assignments were provided to the department for 37,000 kids 2 weeks prior to school starting. So again, there's some opportunities that we can, I think they're very workable, and I understand there's a lot of moving parts with the transportation department, as well as some unforeseen contract negotiations that took place, but we cannot fall by the wayside by something that we were also held accountable as the transportation as a whole with the fine that was assessed because of the obligations that were missed. And we don't seem to, I'm not privy, obviously, to any internal things that are, and measures that are taking place, but from the outside looking in, definitely have some personalized issues with this as well. My daughter attends private school. She's a student still of the district. He received an AM route maybe a couple weeks ago and still has no PM bus route today, this is causing inconvenience. I also support my 80-year-old grandmother as a parent-student advocate, who is the guardian of a 15-year-old student who attends Eastmore Academy. We opted in for his bus assignment this past March. We do understand that this was prior to the new system implementation. However, to date, he still has not either an AM or a PM bus. So I have worked with the customer relations as well as transportation, actively staying in communication with them. And it's like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And once the call center reps are passing this information on for routing, it gets lost. And here with this new system, there's no fluid information, shared information. They're creating more steps for the reps, few reps, and you're servicing 30,000 students plus.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson.
Thank
you, Ms. Jefferson. Your time has actually expired. I know you can't see the clock. We really appreciate you
Okay, so I know that the one last thing I'm saying, I just want to make sure that I don't want this to be something blindsided with the board, but I have contacted the Ohio Department of Education, and I am moving forward with the non-compliance investigation report because there's no resolve for these numbers we do have on file. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson. And you mentioned that there's information. You can go ahead and send anything you'd like to the board as well. All right, board members, executive session, Vice President Reyes.
I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session per section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees, and per section 121.22 G4 to prepare for, conduct, or review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Vera? President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. We will recess in executive session. We will start in 10 minutes, board members.